My name is Rachel Wilson, and at 32, I had finally achieved what I'd been working toward for 7 long years, a promotion to marketing director at Horizon Media Group. The journey wasn't easy. Countless late nights at the office, weekends sacrificed to complete additional certifications, and the constant struggle to prove myself in an industry where results speak louder than words. When my boss called me into his office that Friday afternoon, I honestly thought I was being let go. Budget cuts had been happening across departments, and my stomach dropped as I walked through his door. Instead, he smiled and said, "Congratulations, Rachel, the director position is yours." I nearly collapsed from relief and excitement. That evening, during our weekly family call, I shared my news, trying to contain my enthusiasm while also hoping for some genuine recognition. My mother, Martha, immediately offered to host a celebration party at their suburban home where I grew up. "We'll invite everyone," she exclaimed with unusual enthusiasm. "Your father and I are so proud." Those words felt like water in a desert. I'd been waiting years to hear them. As I hung up, a cautious optimism bloomed in my chest. For once, I thought I'd be the center of attention, that my achievements would be acknowledged by the people whose approval I'd been seeking my entire life. But as I pulled up to my parents' house that Saturday, decorated with balloons and a banner that read, "Congratulations, Rachel," across the front porch, I couldn't shake a familiar feeling of apprehension. Experience had taught me that in the Yawai Wilson family, my moments in the spotlight had an expiration date, usually the moment my younger sister Jessica walked into the room. My career path hadn't been straightforward or easy by any measure. After graduating with a marketing degree, I started at Horizon as an entry-level social media coordinator, making coffee runs and scheduling posts while learning everything I could about digital strategy. I worked my way through every rung of the corporate ladder, from coordinator to specialist, then manager, senior manager, and now, finally, director. Each promotion came with its own set of challenges. The constant need to prove myself in pitch meetings dominated by men 20 years my senior, navigating office politics that threatened to derail my projects, taking on additional responsibilities without complaint or additional compensation. I'd sacrificed relationships, turned down vacations, and even delayed starting a family to focus on my career goals. The marketing industry evolved rapidly, and I evolved with it, learning coding languages, data analytics, and emerging platforms on my own time to stay relevant. Despite these professional accomplishments, my family always seemed to view my career with mild disinterest at best, dismissive condescension at worst. "Marketing? So you make advertisements?" my father would ask, year after year, never quite grasping what I actually did. My mother would nod politely when I explained campaigns or metrics, before quickly changing the subject to something she deemed more significant. The contrast with how they treated my younger sister Jessica couldn't have been more stark. 4 years younger than me at 28, Jessica had followed our father's footsteps into medicine, and from the moment she declared her pre-med major, she became the undisputed star of the family. Where my academic achievements had been expected, hers were celebrated. Where my career milestones received perfunctory acknowledgement, hers warranted family gatherings. "Your sister is saving lives," my mother would remind me whenever I shared a professional accomplishment, as though my work creating marketing strategies was merely playing on computers, as she once put it. My father, always conflict-averse, would remain silent during these exchanges, occasionally offering a conciliatory pat on my shoulder, but never actively challenging the family dynamic. Each holiday dinner became an exercise in invisibility. I'd ask questions about Jessica's medical school adventures, celebrate her achievements, and watch my parents beam with pride, all while my own life updates were relegated to brief mentions between passing the potatoes and clearing the dishes. My therapist, Dr. Levine, had spent the past year helping me identify these patterns and encouraged me to set boundaries and advocate for myself. "Your achievements deserve recognition too," she would remind me during our sessions. "Your worth isn't diminished by your sister's success." Intellectually, I understood this, but emotionally, I still craved my parents' approval and acknowledgement. So when my director promotion came through, the role I'd been working toward for years, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps this time would be different. Perhaps this accomplishment was significant enough to finally earn the respect and recognition I'd been seeking from my family for so long. The 2 weeks between my promotion announcement and the celebration party passed in a blur of excitement and preparation. I threw myself into party planning with my mother, hoping this shared project might bridge some of the emotional distance between us. We spent hours on the phone discussing guest lists, menu options, and decorations. I wanted everything to be perfect, not just to celebrate my achievement, but to create a moment my family couldn't minimize or forget. The weekend before the party, I spent an entire day shopping for the perfect outfit. After trying on countless dresses, I finally found one that made me feel both professional and confident. A deep blue sheath dress that complemented my auburn hair and made my green eyes pop. It cost more than I usually spent on clothing, but this occasion warranted the splurge. As I stood in the dressing room, admiring how the dress hugged my figure in all the right places, I imagined the impressed looks on my colleagues' faces and, more importantly, the proud expressions I hoped to see on my parents. The initial collaboration with my mother on the guest list had gone smoothly. I wanted to invite my close colleagues, friends from college who lived nearby, and of course, my boyfriend David and his family who had always been supportive of my career. My mother suggested inviting extended family, aunts, uncles, and cousins who lived within driving distance, and neighbors who had known me since childhood. I readily agreed, touched that she wanted to make this a significant celebration. But the first minor incident occurred during a phone call 3 days before the party. "I think we should keep the celebration modest," my mother said after I suggested hiring a professional photographer to document the event. "It's just a promotion. After all, we don't want to appear boastful." Her words stung like a paper cut, small but surprisingly painful. Just a promotion minimized the years of work, stress, and sacrifice that had gone into this achievement. I took a deep breath and reminded myself not to read too much into her comment. "It's an important milestone for me, Mom," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. "But we can skip the photographer." The second minor incident happened the next day when my mother called to ask if Jessica could bring some of her medical school friends to the party. "They're in town for a conference," she explained, and Jessica thought it would be nice for them to stop by. I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the same sensation I experienced whenever Jessica's presence expanded to overshadow mine. "It's supposed to be my celebration, Mom," I said carefully. "Won't it be weird to have people there who don't know me?" My mother's silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. "Of course, if it's important to Jessica, they can come," I finally conceded, hating myself for the automatic accommodation but wanting to avoid conflict. That evening, as I relayed these conversations to David over dinner, his usually gentle face hardened with frustration. "Rachel, you need to speak up," he urged, reaching across the table to take my hand. "This is your day. Your family needs to respect that." I nodded, knowing he was right, but also aware of the complex family dynamics at play. "I just want one day where it's about me," I confessed, voicing the thought that had been circling in my head. "One celebration where I'm not competing for attention or validation." David squeezed my hand reassuringly. "Then make sure they understand that," he said simply, as though setting boundaries with my family was as straightforward as presenting quarterly marketing objectives. Despite these early warning signs, I remained determined to stay positive. This promotion represented years of hard work, and regardless of my family's reaction, I deserved to celebrate it properly. As I finalized the last details with the caterer and confirmed the playlist of my favorite songs, I pushed away the nagging worry that history would repeat itself. This time would be different, I told myself. This time, my achievement would stand on its own. The day of the party arrived with perfect early summer weather, sunshine filtering through fluffy white clouds and a gentle breeze carrying the scent of my mother's prized roses. I arrived early to help with final preparations, finding my childhood home transformed into a celebration space. The dining room table had been extended to its full length and covered with a crisp white tablecloth, holding an impressive spread of appetizers. Blue and silver balloons, my favorite colors, floated from strategic corners, and a congratulations banner hung across the living room archway. My mother greeted me with a warm hug, looking elegant in a floral dress I hadn't seen before. "The caterers just finished setting up in the kitchen," she said, leading me through the house. "Your father's picking up the cake." For a moment, the scene before me, my mother's careful preparations, the thoughtfully decorated space, filled me with gratitude and hope. Maybe I had misjudged the situation. Maybe today truly would be different. By 4 o'clock, guests began arriving. First came my college roommate Tara and her husband, bearing a gift bag and enthusiastic hugs. Then a stream of neighbors, distant relatives, and friends filled the house with chatter and laughter. At 4:30, I spotted my boss, Richard, walking up the driveway. I felt a surge of validation. The CEO of Horizon Media Group had made time on a Saturday to attend my celebration. "I wouldn't miss this," Richard said when I thanked him for coming. "You've earned this promotion through exceptional work, Rachel. We're lucky to have you on our leadership team." His genuine praise, spoken within earshot of my father who had just returned with the cake, sent a thrill of vindication through me. My father slapped Richard on the shoulder with unexpected enthusiasm. "That's our daughter who just got promoted," he told another arriving guest, a note of pride in his voice that I rarely heard when he spoke about my career. The sound of it was intoxicating, and I found myself standing taller, smiling wider. By 5 o'clock, the party was in full swing, with about 40 people mingling throughout the first floor and backyard patio. David arrived with a bouquet of my favorite lilies, planting a supportive kiss on my cheek and whispering, "You deserve all of this and more." With David by my side, I floated through conversations, accepting congratulations and sharing anecdotes about my journey to the director position. Several of my colleagues had made the hour-long drive from the city, and their presence reinforced the professional respect I'd earned. Around 5:30, my mother clinked a glass for attention, and the room quieted. "We're here to celebrate Rachel's promotion to marketing director," she announced, her voice carrying across the space. "We're so proud of her dedication and hard work." She raised her glass in my direction. "To Rachel!" The room echoed the toast, and I felt a lump form in my throat as I stepped forward to say a few words. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate with me today," I began, scanning the supportive faces. "This promotion represents years of effort, and having you all here means the world to me." I continued with brief thanks to my team members present, to Richard for his mentorship, to David for his unwavering support, and finally to my parents for hosting the celebration. The applause felt genuine, and for a blissful hour I basked in the warm glow of achievement and recognition. I had meaningful conversations with relatives who seemed genuinely interested in my work, received thoughtful cards and gifts, and even witnessed my usually reserved father describing my recent successful campaign to an attentive neighbor. The third minor incident occurred so subtly I almost missed it. I was deep in conversation with Richard about our upcoming strategy for a major client when my mother appeared at my elbow, interrupting mid-sentence. "Richard, would you excuse us for a moment? I need Rachel's opinion on something in the kitchen." I apologized to Richard and followed my mother, expecting some party emergency. Instead, she asked, "Do you know what time Jessica will arrive? Should we wait to bring out the main course?" The question seemed innocent enough, but the interruption of an important professional conversation for such a trivial matter sent a familiar pang through my chest. "She texted she'd be here by 6, I replied, keeping my tone light despite the internal warning bells. "Don't hold up the food on her account." I returned to find Richard engaged with another colleague, the moment for private conversation with my boss lost. I pushed down the flicker of resentment, determined not to let small things spoil the day. But as 6 o'clock approached, I noticed my mother checking her watch and glancing toward the front door with increasing frequency, and I couldn't help but sense the subtle shift in the atmosphere, a collective holding of breath, an anticipation that had nothing to do with my celebration and everything to do with my sister's imminent arrival. The front door opened at exactly 6:15, and Jessica's melodic laugh preceded her physical presence. She entered like a gust of fresh air, her dark hair, so unlike my auburn waves, pulled into an elegant updo, her slender figure showcased in a simple yet expensive-looking emerald dress. Where I had always been the more reserved sister, Jessica possessed an effortless charisma that drew people toward her like magnets. "Sorry I'm late," she announced to the room at large, her voice carrying over conversations that immediately hushed at her appearance. "Traffic was horrible, and then we had to stop for gas." She rushed toward me, enveloping me in a perfumed hug. Congratulations, Rach. I'm so proud of you. Director of Marketing. That's huge. Her enthusiasm seemed genuine, and for a moment I allowed myself to relax into her embrace, to believe that my sister could be present without overshadowing me. That illusion shattered within minutes. My mother, who had been circulating among guests with trays of appetizers, materialized at Jessica's side with remarkable speed. "Darling, you're here at last," she exclaimed, as though the party's true guest of honor had finally arrived. "Let me introduce you to Rachel's boss." Without asking either of us, she whisked Jessica away to meet Richard, leaving me mid-sentence, in a conversation with my cousin. I watched as my mother proudly announced not only Jessica's presence, but also her recent accomplishment, acceptance into one of the country's most prestigious cardiology residency programs. Richard, ever the polite professional, offered appropriate congratulations before attempting to steer the conversation back to marketing topics. But my mother persisted, elaborating on Jessica's academic achievements and future medical career, effectively transforming my boss into a captive audience for my sister's accolades. The fourth minor incident occurred during what should have been my moment, the official toast. David had just handed me a fresh glass of champagne, and I had clinked my spoon against it, preparing to thank everyone for coming. As the room quieted and attention turned my way, my mother suddenly appeared with a small velvet box. "Before Rachel says a few words," she interjected, "I wanted to show everyone something special. Jessica just received this award from her medical school for exceptional patient care during her internship." She opened the box to reveal a small gold pin, which she proceeded to pass around for guests to admire. My prepared toast died on my lips as conversations immediately erupted about the award, medical school, and Jessica's accomplishments. Across the room, I caught Tara's sympathetic wince and David's darkening expression. My college friends exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their understanding of the situation. I forced myself to take several deep breaths, counting backward from 10 as Dr. Levine had taught me during therapy. When I finally managed to reclaim attention for my toast, the moment felt diminished, the energy dispersed. Throughout the next hour, the pattern continued with increasing obviousness. Every time I found myself at the center of a conversation about my career or promotion, my mother would find a way to redirect attention to Jessica, sometimes subtly, sometimes blatantly. "Rachel's new position sounds impressive," I overheard her telling my aunt, "but you should hear about the research Jessica is contributing to. They're making breakthroughs in cardiac care that could save thousands of lives." Jessica herself seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the situation, occasionally trying to deflect attention back to me with comments like, "But this is Rachel's day," or "I want to hear more about Rachel's promotion." But the damage was being done incrementally, systematically. With each passing minute, I felt my special day slipping away, transforming into yet another showcase for my sister's achievements. My resentment built slowly but steadily, a simmering pot threatening to boil over. Around 7:30, David pulled me aside onto the patio, away from the crowd. "We could leave," he suggested quietly. "Go celebrate properly with just our friends. You don't have to stay and endure this." Part of me wanted desperately to take his offer, to escape the familiar pain of being rendered invisible in my own family narrative. But a stronger part refused to surrender what was rightfully mine. "No," I said firmly. "This is my celebration. I've earned it. I'm not leaving." David squeezed my hand, concern evident in his eyes. "Just remember, you don't have to put up with this anymore. You're not that little girl desperate for their approval." His words echoed my therapist's guidance, but implementation proved harder than theory. As the party continued, I found myself withdrawing internally, questioning my own reaction. Was I being petty? Overly sensitive? Was my promotion truly less significant than Jessica's residency acceptance? The marketing director position represented the culmination of years of strategic career building, but did it pale in comparison to saving lives? The doubt crept in like a fog, obscuring my perspective and dampening my initial joy. I watched as several of my colleagues made early departures, their uncomfortable awareness of the family dynamic evident in their hurried goodbyes and extra warm congratulations. Each exit felt like a personal failure, my professional circle, witnessing my inability to claim space even at my own celebration. The party's atmosphere shifted substantially after dinner was served. What had begun as my celebration had transformed into a strange hybrid event, where my promotion seemed increasingly like a footnote to Jessica's medical career. My mother, holding court in the living room, didn't even attempt subtlety anymore. "Marketing is fine," I overheard her telling my father's cousin, "and we're proud of Rachel's dedication. But medicine, now that's a calling. Jessica will be saving lives, while most people are just selling products." The casual dismissal of my entire profession stung like alcohol on an open wound. I caught Jessica's expression, a mix of embarrassment and helplessness, but she made no move to correct our mother's assessment. The guests had naturally segregated into groups, with my friends and colleagues clustered supportively around. Me on the patio while family members flocked to Jessica in the living room. Uncle Robert, who hadn't asked me a single question about my promotion, cornered Jessica with detailed inquiries about cardiac procedures. "Is it true that stent technology has improved recovery times?" he asked eagerly. "My golf buddy just had one placed last month." Aunt Diane wanted Jessica's opinion on her arthritis medication. Cousin Michael's wife sought advice about their newborn's sleep patterns. It seemed everyone had momentarily forgotten why we were gathered in the first place. The fifth minor incident occurred during what should have been a simple family photo session. My father, attempting to document the celebration, called for a family picture. "Rachel in the middle," he directed, "since it's her special day." But as we assembled, my mother rearranged our positions. "Jessica, you stand in the center with Rachel," she instructed, "and then everyone else around you both." What began as one quick family photo expanded into an impromptu photo shoot featuring various combinations of Jessica with different relatives, each one exclaiming how photogenic she was, how the camera loved her. When I suggested a photo with just my colleagues and me, my mother frowned slightly. "We should be inclusive, Rachel. Everyone together." My attempt to carve out even this small moment for my professional achievement was rebuffed. I retreated to the kitchen, ostensibly to check on dessert, but really to collect myself. Through the doorway, I could hear my mother's voice, animated and proud, describing Jessica's residency program to anyone who would listen. "Only 3% of applicants get accepted," she boasted. The director said her research proposal was one of the most innovative they'd seen in years. I busied myself arranging coffee cups, trying to quell the rising sense of invisibility that threatened to overwhelm me. David found me there, his expression a mix of concern and controlled anger on my behalf. "Your mother just introduced me to your cousin as Jessica's sister's boyfriend," he reported quietly, "not even by my name or yours." The absurdity of it almost made me laugh, but the humor quickly dissolved into hurt. More of my colleagues were making discreet exits, offering congratulations and promises to catch up at work, their discomfort with the family dynamic evident in their hasty departures. Tara approached me with undisguised concern. "Rachel, are you okay? This is not what I expected." Her diplomatic phrasing couldn't mask her shock at how my celebration had been hijacked. "I'm fine," I lied. The automatic response so practiced, it felt like muscle memory. "You know how my family is." But I wasn't fine. The cumulative effect of each slight, each redirection, each dismissal, was building toward something I could no longer contain. My therapist's voice echoed in my mind. Repressed feelings don't disappear. They transform and resurface, often destructively. I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment of privacy to process the emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Locking the door behind me, I stared at my reflection in the mirror, cheeks flushed with a combination of hurt and anger, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Am I overreacting?" I whispered to my reflection. "Is it selfish to want one day to be about my achievement?" The rational part of my brain understood that Jessica wasn't actively trying to steal my spotlight. She was simply existing in a family system that had always prioritized her. But knowing the dynamic wasn't entirely her fault didn't lessen the pain of once again being rendered secondary, even at an event specifically organized to celebrate me. The pattern had persisted for so long that it had become our family's gravitational force. Jessica at the center, everyone else orbiting around her, with me perpetually pushed to the furthest rings. As I splashed cold water on my face and Reapplied my lipstick. I made a decision. I would not cause a scene. I would maintain dignity. I would finish this party gracefully and then process my feelings later with Dr. Levine. I would not let this become another family story about Rachel's overreaction or Rachel's jealousy. I returned to the party with renewed determination to salvage what remained of my celebration. But as I stepped into the living room, I realized I had dramatically misjudged how far the situation would deteriorate. I returned from the bathroom to find my mother standing in the center of the living room, tapping a dessert fork against her wine glass to gather everyone's attention. The distinctive chiming cut through conversations, and a hush fell over the remaining guests. My mother beamed at the assembled crowd, her confidence radiating as she prepared to speak. "First, I want to thank everyone for coming today to celebrate Rachel's promotion," she began, nodding in my direction with a perfunctory smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We're certainly proud of her hard work and dedication to her advertising career." The slight hesitation and mischaracterization of my profession. I was in comprehensive digital marketing strategy, not merely advertising, was subtle, but unmistakable. I felt David tense beside me, his hand finding mine in silent support. "However," my mother continued, her voice lifting with genuine enthusiasm, "while we're all gathered here celebrating achievements, I think this is the perfect opportunity to focus on Jessica's incredible accomplishment as well." The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees as my mother's intentions became clear. This wasn't going to be a brief acknowledgement of Jessica's residency acceptance. This was a complete redirection of the entire event. As some of you already know, Jessica recently received news that she's been accepted into the cardiology residency program at Massachusetts General, which is consistently ranked as the #1 hospital in the nation. My mother's voice swelled with undisguised pride. "Only 3% of applicants are accepted. 3%. She gestured for Jessica to join her at the center of the room. My sister rose reluctantly, her expression a complicated mix of embarrassment and resignation. She'd been in this position before, thrust into the spotlight by our mother's overwhelming pride, but never at an event explicitly meant to celebrate my achievement. "Jessica will be following a research track focusing on innovative treatments for heart failure," my mother continued, her arm around Jessica's shoulders. Her supervising physician told her that her research proposal was one of the most promising they'd seen from an incoming resident in years. The detailed praise continued, each superlative driving the knife deeper into my chest. I stood frozen, watching my celebration being systematically dismantled and reconstructed around my sister. Some guests, primarily my family members, nodded along enthusiastically, completely untroubled by the blatant redirection. Others, my friends and remaining colleagues, shifted uncomfortably, exchanging concerned glances and darting sympathetic looks in my direction. The final blow came when my mother gestured to my father, who had disappeared into the kitchen. Moments earlier, he returned carrying a cake, not the one I had glimpsed earlier with, "Congratulations on your promotion, Rachel," written in blue icing, but a completely different one. This cake was white with red accents, the colors of the medical profession, and bore the inscription, "Congratulations, Dr. Jessica," in elegant script. "We had this made specially when we heard Jessica's news," my mother explained to the stunned room. "We thought today would be the perfect opportunity to celebrate both our daughters." The pretense that this was still partially my celebration had worn tissue thin. I felt the blood drain from my face as I stared at the cake, at my beaming mother, at my uncomfortable but complicit father, at Jessica's conflicted expression. The room seemed to waver around me, voices becoming distant as though I were underwater. 7 years of hard work, of proving myself in a competitive industry, of sacrifices and stress and determination. All of it reduced to an afterthought at my own celebration, completely overshadowed by my sister's accomplishment. The pain was so acute it felt physical, a crushing pressure in my chest that made it difficult to breathe. Jessica, to her credit, attempted to redirect attention. "Mom, this is Rachel's party," she said, her voice low but carrying in the awkward silence that had descended. "We can celebrate my news another time." But my mother waved away the concern. "Nonsense. We're all family here. We can celebrate both. Our girls at once." She began cutting the cake, serving Jessica the first piece with ceremonial flourish. I watched my colleagues exchange glances before making subtle moves toward the door, clearly eager to escape the uncomfortable family dynamic now on full display. Richard, my boss, approached me with genuine concern. "Rachel, I should head out. Early meeting tomorrow. Congratulations again on the promotion. The team is lucky to have you in leadership." His eyes conveyed understanding and sympathy that his words couldn't explicitly express in this setting. David's grip on my hand had tightened to the point of discomfort, his normally gentle demeanor replaced by barely contained indignation. "Rachel," he whispered urgently, "you don't have to stand for this. Say something or let's leave." I felt suspended between two impossible choices: speak up and risk being labeled dramatic and jealous, or remain silent and once again allow myself to be erased within my own family narrative. As I watched my mother place the celebration cake in front of Jessica while my relatives clustered around to congratulate her, something shifted inside me, a lifetime of accommodation and self-doubt crystallizing into sudden, sharp clarity. As I stood watching my celebration disintegrate around me, memories cascaded through my mind with startling clarity, a mental slideshow of all the times I had been rendered invisible in my own family. I remembered my high school graduation, where my parents' conversation at dinner afterwards centered on Jessica's upcoming dance recital rather than my valedictorian speech. I recalled my college acceptance to Northwestern being overshadowed by Jessica's perfect SAT scores, despite her being only a sophomore at the time. The pattern had been established so early and reinforced so consistently that I had internalized it as normal, as deserved. The voice of my therapist cut through these painful recollections. "Family dynamics are powerful, Rachel, but they're not immutable. Patterns continue until someone is brave enough to break them." I had nodded during that session, intellectually, understanding her point while emotionally believing that someone could never be me. Yet standing in my parents' living room, watching my mother serve my sister cake at my promotion party, something fundamental shifted within me. The realization dawned with startling clarity. This pattern would continue indefinitely unless I chose to disrupt it. No magical moment of recognition would suddenly make my parents balance their attention and validation. No amount of achievement would ever be enough to correct the imbalance if I didn't advocate for myself. My therapist had explained how family systems work, how each member plays an assigned role that becomes so embedded in the family's functioning that any deviation causes discomfort and resistance. I had been cast as the self-sufficient, independent daughter who didn't need attention or validation, while Jessica was the celebrated golden child whose achievements warranted constant acknowledgement. These weren't roles we had chosen, but ones we had been gradually molded to fulfill through years of reinforcement. I felt a complex wave of emotions crash through me, hurt so deep it left me breathless, anger that burned like acid, and beneath it all, a surprising sense of clarity and resolve. The physical sensations were overwhelming, my heart pounding against my ribs, my throat constricted, my hands trembling slightly at my sides. But alongside these reactions came a strange calm, a certainty about what needed to happen next. I watched. My relatives clustered around Jessica, exclaiming over the cake and peppering her with questions about her residency. I saw my remaining friends and colleagues standing awkwardly at the periphery, witnessing my humiliation with sympathetic discomfort. And I observed my mother, animated, glowing with pride as she detailed Jessica's accomplishments to an attentive audience completely oblivious to or unconcerned with how her actions affected me. In that moment, I understood with perfect clarity that my sense of self-worth couldn't continue to hinge on receiving validation from people fundamentally incapable of providing it. The approval I had been seeking for decades would never come, in the form I needed. This realization, while painful, was also strangely liberating. For so long, I had attributed the constant overlooking of my achievements to some fundamental lack in myself. That if I were somehow more accomplished, more interesting, more worthy, then surely my family would acknowledge me properly. Now, I understood that the issue had never been my worthiness. It was the family system itself that was broken. I glanced at David, his face tight with controlled anger on my behalf, and made my decision. I leaned close to his ear and whispered, "I'm going to say something. I need to do this." His expression shifted from anger to concern mixed with pride. "I'm right here," he murmured back, squeezing my hand in reassurance. Taking a deep breath, I moved toward the center of the room where my mother was in the middle of describing Jessica's research proposal in enthusiastic detail. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I approached the side table where the microphone from earlier toasts still rested. With hands that trembled slightly but purposefully, I picked it up, feeling its weight as both a physical object and a symbol of the voice I had suppressed for too long. The chatter in the room continued unabated, no one noticing my movement, until I switched on the microphone, creating the soft feedback hum that drew all eyes in my direction. Standing tall in the dress I had chosen so carefully for my celebration, I prepared to speak up and reclaim what was mine. I cleared my throat, the sound amplified through the room, cutting conversations short as heads turned toward me. My mother's expression shifted from confusion to mild irritation at the interruption, while Jessica's features registered immediate understanding and concern. "Thank you all for coming today," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "I wanted to take a moment to address something important." I paused, feeling the weight of 4 decades of silence pressing against my chest, but pushed through it with new determination. "First, I want to acknowledge my sister's incredible achievement. Jessica, your acceptance to the cardiology residency program is truly remarkable, and I am genuinely proud of you." I met her eyes across the room, wanting her to understand that my issue wasn't with her success. "Your dedication to medicine and patient care is inspiring, and I have no doubt you'll make an extraordinary cardiologist." Jessica gave me a small nod, her eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and apprehension about where my speech was heading. I took another steadying breath before continuing. "That said, I need to address the fact that this gathering was organized specifically to celebrate my promotion to marketing director, a position I've worked toward for 7 years through consistent sacrifice, strategic career building, and dedication to my craft." My voice remained calm but took on an edge of authority I typically reserved for boardroom presentations. "What we've witnessed today is unfortunately not an isolated incident, but rather a pattern that has defined our family dynamic for as long as I can remember." The room had fallen completely silent, the tension almost tangible as guests froze in place, unsure where to look. My mother's face had drained of color, her lips pressed into a thin line. My father stood beside her, his expression a complicated mixture of discomfort and dawning recognition. Throughout my life, I've watched my achievements, milestones, and significant moments consistently redirected to focus on Jessica. This isn't Jessica's fault. She never asked for this spotlight. But the pattern has been both persistent and damaging. I maintained eye contact with my parents as I spoke, refusing to back down from the truth I was finally articulating. For years, I've felt invisible in my own family, my accomplishments minimized, my career dismissed as less important, my moments of celebration transformed into opportunities to highlight someone else's journey. My voice wavered slightly, but I pushed through, determined to finish what I had started. I've spent countless hours in therapy working to understand why my self-worth became so dependent on validation I was never going to receive. I've struggled to recognize my own achievements as valuable when the people who should have been my biggest supporters consistently treated them as secondary. The silence in the room had become almost unbearable, guests shifting uncomfortably as my family's dynamic was laid bare before them. But I couldn't stop now. Years of suppressed truth were finally finding expression. Today was meant to be a celebration of a significant professional milestone, one that represents years of strategic work, leadership development, and proven results in a highly competitive industry. The fact that this celebration has been systematically redirected is not just hurtful, it's emblematic of a pattern that needs to end. I straightened my shoulders, feeling a strange new power in naming what had always been present but never acknowledged. I want to be absolutely clear. I am immensely proud of my promotion. I am proud of my career in marketing. I am proud of the campaigns I've developed, the teams I've led, and the results I've achieved. My work has value and significance, regardless of whether it receives recognition within this family. I glanced around the room, making brief eye contact with my remaining colleagues and friends, drawing strength from their supportive expressions. I've decided that I will no longer participate in a family dynamic that requires me to diminish myself and my accomplishments. I deserve celebration and acknowledgement, just as Jessica does. I deserve to take pride in my journey without constant comparison or redirection. I turned back to my parents, my voice softening slightly but remaining firm. I love you both, and I know you love me, but love without respect and recognition is incomplete. I'm not asking for special treatment, just equal consideration. I placed the microphone down on the side table with deliberate calm. I'll be leaving now to continue my celebration with people who value my achievements. Thank you to those who came today with genuine support and congratulations. It meant more than you know. The silence that followed was absolute. Faces around, the room registering shock, embarrassment, and in some cases, dawning recognition. Jessica was the first to move, crossing the room toward me with tears in her eyes. "Rachel, I'm so sorry," she said quietly, reaching for my hands. "I never wanted to overshadow you. I should have spoken up sooner." Her apology felt genuine, and I squeezed her hands in acknowledgement. "This isn't about you, Jess. It never was. You deserve every celebration and accolade, just not at the expense of mine." My mother recovered next, her face flushed with a combination of embarrassment and indignation. "Rachel, I don't think this was the appropriate time or place to air family grievances," she said stiffly. "You've embarrassed us all with this display." Her dismissive characterization of my moment of truth-telling as a display confirmed that she hadn't truly heard me, but I felt strangely unbothered by her reaction. For perhaps the first time, her approval seemed less important than my own. Self-respect. My father surprised everyone by speaking up next. "Martha, stop!" His voice was quiet but firm, silencing my mother's budding lecture. "Rachel's right. We've been doing this for years, making everything about Jessica while treating Rachel's accomplishments as secondary. I've seen it happening but never said anything. That was wrong." His unexpected acknowledgement brought fresh tears to my eyes. "I'm sorry, Rachel," he continued, meeting my gaze directly. "Your career and achievements are extraordinary, and we haven't given them the recognition they deserve. That's on us, not you." The room erupted into awkward murmurs and movements as guests tried to process the family drama unfolding before them. Some looked away in embarrassment, others watched with undisguised fascination, while my close friends moved protectively closer to me. David slipped his arm around my waist, a gesture of both support and readiness to leave. What followed was 20 minutes of intense family discussion that fluctuated between defensive justifications, tearful apologies, and attempts at reconciliation. My mother cycled through denial. "We've always been equally proud of both of you." Anger. "After all we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" And eventually, the beginning stages of reluctant recognition. Perhaps we have sometimes focused more on Jessica's path. My father, having broken his pattern of silent complicity, continued to speak up, acknowledging specific instances where my achievements had been overlooked or diminished. Jessica, for her part, expressed genuine remorse for not recognizing and challenging the dynamic sooner. Throughout this emotional exchange, I maintained a calm centeredness that felt entirely new, no longer desperate for their approval or validation, but speaking my truth and setting boundaries from a place of self-respect. When David eventually checked his watch and murmured that we should leave if we wanted to meet friends at the restaurant we'd arranged as a backup celebration, I nodded and began making my goodbyes. Some relatives avoided eye contact, clearly, uncomfortable with the confrontation they had witnessed. Others offered subdued congratulations on both my promotion and my courage to speak up. My closest friends gathered their belongings to join us at the restaurant, their solidarity a balm to the raw emotions of the evening. As David and I walked toward the door, my mother called after me, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Rachel, please don't leave like this. We can talk more, fix this." I turned back one last time, feeling neither triumph nor bitterness, but a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. "We will talk, Mom, but not tonight. Tonight I'm going to celebrate my promotion properly, with people who are genuinely happy, for me." With that, David and I stepped out into the evening air, the weight of decades of silence finally lifted from my shoulders. 6 weeks passed before I had a real conversation with my mother. The days following my confrontation at the party were filled with a strange mixture of emotions: liberation and anxiety, pride and doubt, relief and grief. I threw myself into my new director role at work, finding comfort in the clear metrics of success and the straightforward validation that came from executing strategies that delivered results. David remained a steady presence, neither pushing me to reconcile with my family nor encouraging me to maintain distance, simply supporting whatever path I chose to heal. My weekly sessions with Dr. Levine took on new depth as we worked through the aftermath of my confrontation. "What you did took extraordinary courage," she said during our first appointment after the party. "Breaking entrenched family patterns is one of the hardest psychological tasks we face as adults." We talked about the concept of differentiation, the process of defining yourself apart from your family of origin while still maintaining connection. "The goal isn't to sever ties," she explained, "but to establish healthier boundaries and interactions." The first contact came 3 days after the party, a text from Jessica. "Can we meet for coffee? Just us." We met at a quiet cafe halfway, between her hospital and my office. The conversation was initially awkward, but gradually opened into something honest and healing. "I never realized how much Mom and Dad dismissed your career," Jessica admitted, stirring her latte absently. "I mean, I knew they made a big deal about medicine, but I didn't see how that came at your expense." I appreciated her willingness to acknowledge the dynamic without becoming defensive. "It wasn't your responsibility to notice," I assured her. "You were just accepting the affirmation any child would want from their parents." We talked for hours, peeling back layers of our shared history to examine how the family system had shaped both of us. Me as the overlooked child constantly seeking validation, her as the golden child burdened with excessive expectations. "Sometimes I feel like nothing I achieve will ever be enough," she confessed. "Mom and Dad have built this narrative about my brilliance and success that doesn't leave room for mistakes or uncertainty." For perhaps the first time, we connected, as adults rather than as competitors in our parents' attention economy. My father called next, his voice gruff with emotion. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Rachel," he said. "You were right about everything. I let your mother set the tone for how we treated you and Jessica, and I never stepped in when I should have." His admission without excuses or qualifications felt like a gift. "I always saw your drive and independence," he continued. "But instead of admiring those qualities, I used them as an excuse to focus less on you. I told myself you didn't need the encouragement as much as Jessica did." He paused, clearing his throat. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry." We arranged to meet for lunch the following week, just the two of us, something we had rarely done throughout my adult life. Over sandwiches at a deli near my office, we talked about my career in detail, my father asking thoughtful questions about marketing strategies and campaign metrics. For the first time, I felt him engaging with my professional life with genuine interest rather than polite detachment. My mother proved the most resistant to change, as Dr. Levine had predicted. "Family systems fight to maintain homeostasis," she explained during one session. "Your mother's identity is deeply invested in the established dynamic. Change threatens her understanding of herself and her role." When my mother finally called 3 weeks after the party, her approach was cautious and somewhat defensive. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, her voice carefully neutral. "I still think the timing was inappropriate, but I understand you felt overlooked." It wasn't the full acknowledgement I might have hoped for, but it was an opening. We agreed to meet for dinner, an evening that proved emotionally exhausting but ultimately productive. My mother cycled between justifications. We were just proud of Jessica's medical career, minimizations. "I'm sure we celebrated your accomplishments, too," and occasional moments of genuine reflection. "Perhaps we did take your resilience for granted." By dessert, we had reached a tentative truce, with my mother agreeing to be more mindful about how she acknowledged my achievements, and my agreeing to communicate my feelings more directly before they reached a breaking point. The healing process wasn't linear. There were uncomfortable family dinners where old patterns threatened to reemerge, moments when I had to gently but firmly redirect conversations, and instances where I needed to step away to maintain my newly established boundaries. But gradually, incrementally, the dynamic began to shift. 2 months after the promotion party debacle, my parents invited David and me to dinner at their home. I accepted with some trepidation, unsure what to expect. When we arrived, I was surprised to find a small cake on the dining room table with, "Congratulations, Director Rachel," written in blue icing, the same cake that had been overshadowed at the party. "We wanted to do this properly," my father explained, his expression earnest. "Just us, celebrating you." My mother, still working on expressing genuine enthusiasm for my career, had nevertheless made an effort to ask specific questions about my new role and responsibilities. The evening wasn't perfect, but it represented genuine effort and change. The professional impact of my newfound assertiveness surprised me most. In meetings at Horizon, I found myself speaking up more confidently, challenging ideas when necessary, and advocating for my team with new conviction. Richard noted the change during my first quarterly review as director. "There's a solidness to your leadership that's really developed these past few months," he observed. "You're not just competent, you've always been that. But now you seem more anchored, more willing to take up space." My personal relationships evolved as well. With David, I found myself less anxious about seeking reassurance, more secure in articulating my needs and boundaries. Friendships deepened as I learned to invest in people who celebrated my successes rather than diminishing them. Most significantly, my relationship with Jessica transformed from one of unconscious competition to genuine sisterhood. Free from the roles we'd been assigned by our family system, we discovered common ground and mutual respect that had previously been obscured by the uneven distribution of parental attention. 6 months after the confrontation, I found myself mentoring a young woman named Alicia, who had recently joined the marketing team. During a check-in meeting, she confessed her struggle with a senior colleague who consistently took credit for her ideas. "I don't want to seem difficult," she explained, her concern mirroring my former hesitation to advocate for myself. Drawing from my own experience, I leaned forward and said what I wished someone had told me years earlier. "Your voice matters, Alicia. Your work matters. And you deserve recognition for both." As I spoke these words, I realized how completely I had internalized them for myself. No longer merely intellectual concepts, but lived truths that had transformed my relationship with myself and others. The journey towards self-validation wasn't complete. There would always be moments of doubt and old patterns attempting to reassert themselves. But I had discovered something essential. Finding my voice changed not just how others saw me, but how I saw myself. In speaking up at that promotion party, I had broken not only a family pattern, but also an internal one, the belief that my worth needed external confirmation to be real. Now I understood that while recognition from others might be pleasant, the most important validation would always come from within. Have you ever had to speak up in a situation where you felt consistently overlooked or undervalued? What gave you the courage to finally break that pattern? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that your achievements deserve recognition, and sometimes that starts with recognizing them yourself. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to hear more experiences that might reflect your own journey. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to speak your truth when it matters most.
I'm Allison Parker, 28, and I never thought my sister's palm connecting with my face would be the moment that finally set me free. For years, I'd been the family ATM, the reliable one, the responsible sister who couldn't say no. That slap echoed through my apartment, but it was the sound of my mother's laughter afterward that truly broke something inside me. The Hawaii vacation they'd planned, using my credit, became the final chapter in our toxic story. If you've ever wondered when enough is enough with family, my story might give you your answer. Before I dive in, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe if family drama stories like mine resonate with you. I grew up as the middle child in what I thought was a normal American family. My older sister Megan is now 32, and my younger brother Ethan is 24. On the surface, we were the typical suburban family, living in a modest home in Ohio, taking annual camping trips, and celebrating holidays together. That facade cracked when I was 15 and my parents divorced. My father moved across the country for a new job, and over time, his presence in our lives diminished to occasional phone calls and birthday cards. My mother, Rebecca, never quite recovered financially from the divorce. Though she received child support, it wasn't enough to maintain our previous lifestyle. She found work as a receptionist, but refused better opportunities that would require additional training or education. "I'm too old to start over," she'd say, though she was only in her early 40s at the time. I was always the studious one in the family. While Megan was popular and focused on her social life, and Ethan struggled with learning disabilities, I found refuge in academics. My high school counselor encouraged me to apply for scholarships, and I managed to secure enough funding to attend the state university with minimal loans. I worked part-time throughout college, graduated with honors in accounting, and quickly secured a position at a respected firm. My first mistake was telling my family about my starting salary. The day after my graduation celebration, my mother called with tears in her voice. The roof was leaking, and the repair would cost $2,800. "I wouldn't ask if I had anyone else to turn to," she said. I transferred the money that afternoon. The small loan was never mentioned again, much less repaid. This established a pattern that would continue for years. 3 months later, Megan needed $1,500 for car repairs. Then my mother's refrigerator died, another $1,200. Ethan needed textbooks and a laptop for community college, $900 more. Each time, the request came with promises of repayment that never materialized. By the time I was 25, I had been promoted twice and had a comfortable salary, but my savings were minimal because of these constant emergencies. When I bought my first condo, I was thrilled to have a place of my own. Within a week, Megan showed up at my door with her oldest child. "Tyler has a work thing, and Mom's busy. I just need you to watch Zoe for the afternoon," she said, already backing toward her car. That afternoon turned into evening, then overnight. Megan didn't return my calls until the following day, when she arrived with fast food and a casual thanks, as if I'd done her a minor favor instead of providing 24 hours of unplanned childcare. As Megan had 2 more children, Lucas and Emma, now 5 and 3, the impromptu babysitting requests increased. I became the default caregiver whenever Megan and her husband Tyler had important plans, which seemed to include everything from actual work commitments to bar hopping with friends. Tyler particularly frustrated me. He bounced between jobs, never staying anywhere longer than 6 months, always with a story about terrible management or unfair expectations. Yet somehow he always had money for his vintage car collection and weekend fishing trips. Meanwhile, Megan worked part-time at a boutique, but spent more than she earned on clothing and home decor. My mother enabled all of this. When I expressed frustration about the constant babysitting and financial requests, she would sigh and say, "Your sister has 3 children to take care of. You only have yourself. Family helps family." That phrase, "family helps family," became a weapon used against me whenever I hesitated to provide money or time. The guilt was effective. I'd think about my comfortable condo, my stable job, my freedom, and feel selfish for not wanting to share my resources. Last year, when my grandmother passed away, she left each grandchild a small inheritance of $5,000. Mine went entirely to helping Megan and Tyler catch up on their mortgage after they received foreclosure warnings. They had spent their own inheritances on a lavish anniversary trip to Cancun, assuming they could figure out the mortgage situation later. My portion of the inheritance saved their house, but the only thanks I received was Megan saying, "That's what family is supposed to do." 3 months ago, I received another promotion and a modest raise. I hadn't told anyone in my family, but somehow, Megan found out. Perhaps she overheard me on the phone, or maybe she went through my mail during one of her visits. Whatever the source, the knowledge that I had more income sparked a new wave of requests. My mother's car suddenly needed extensive repairs. Megan and Tyler's roof developed a mysterious leak. Ethan needed help with a security deposit for a new apartment. With each request, the emotional toll grew heavier. I began having anxiety attacks before family gatherings, knowing they would inevitably include requests for money or time. I started working longer hours, partly for the career advancement, but mostly to have a valid excuse to avoid family obligations. Sorry, I have to work became my mantra, though it rarely deterred them. You can take one day off, they'd insist, not understanding or caring that my career required dedication and presence. Despite all this, I continued to help when I could. I told myself it was temporary, that eventually everyone would get on their feet. I didn't realize I was enabling a cycle that had no intention of ending on its own. After a particularly grueling week that included a major client presentation and over 60 hours at the office, I dragged myself home on Friday evening, dreaming of a hot bath and an early night. When I opened my door, I found Megan, Tyler, and my mother sitting in my living room. They had used the spare key I'd given my mother for emergencies to let themselves in. Surprise! Megan called out, as if their uninvited presence in my home was a gift. I set down my laptop bag and kicked off my heels, too exhausted to even muster proper irritation. What's going on? They exchanged excited glances, and Tyler pulled out his phone to show me a series of photos: pristine beaches, luxury resorts, palm trees, and stunning ocean views. We're going to Hawaii, Megan announced, clapping her hands like a child. 2 full weeks in Maui. We found this amazing rental property right on the beach. That's great, I said cautiously, already sensing there was more to this visit than sharing good news. When are you going? Next month, my mother said, beaming. The first 2 weeks of June. The weather will be perfect. I nodded, calculating how they could possibly afford such a trip. Tyler must have gotten a new job, or perhaps they'd come into some money I didn't know about. We have a small favor to ask, Megan said, using the phrase that always preceded a not small request. We need you to watch the kids while we're gone. I blinked, processing this. All 3 kids? For 2 weeks. It's perfect timing, Megan continued, ignoring my stunned expression. School will be out, so you won't have to worry about drop-offs and pickups. They can just stay here with you. Here? In my 1-bedroom condo? I asked, looking around at my compact living space. Well, you could stay at our place, Tyler suggested, as if he was offering a solution rather than creating a bigger imposition. That way they'd have all their stuff. I took a deep breath. I can't take 2 weeks off work, especially not in June. We have quarter-end closings, and I've already committed to covering for a colleague who's getting married. Megan waved this off. You can work from home. Lots of people do it these days. Zoe's old enough to help with the little ones during your calls. She's 7, I pointed out. Going on 17, Megan laughed. She's very mature for her age. My mother jumped in. We've already looked at flights and put deposits on some activities. It's going to be amazing. Something in her phrasing caught my attention. Wait, you've already made bookings? How are you paying for all this? A flash of discomfort crossed Tyler's face before he recovered with a smile. We've been saving up. I would have believed that more if I hadn't just covered their mortgage payment 3 months earlier. Really? That's great, I said, still suspicious. Megan glanced at my mother, then said, well, we did have to get creative with the financing. But the important thing is, we found a way to make it work. What does creative financing mean exactly? I asked, my accountant brain immediately on alert. We just needed a good credit score for the rental property, my mother explained. So we used your address on the application. My stomach dropped. You what? It's not a big deal, Megan insisted. The payments are going through our account. Your address just helped us get approved. That's fraud, I said flatly. Tyler snorted. Don't be so dramatic. People do this kind of thing all the time. A horrible suspicion made me reach for my purse. I dug out my wallet and checked my credit cards. My secondary card, which I kept for emergencies but rarely used, was missing. Looking for this? Megan asked, pulling my credit card from her purse. We borrowed it to book a few activities. The volcanic helicopter tour had a great early bird special, but it was ending today. I snatched the card back, fury building inside me. You stole my credit card? and used my address for a rental application without my knowledge. Borrowed, not stole, Megan corrected. We're going to pay you back. And like Tyler said, the address thing is no big deal. It is a big deal, I exclaimed. It's identity theft and fraud. Oh, please, my mother sighed. Stop being so uptight. This is for a family vacation. A vacation I wasn't invited to, I pointed out. Megan rolled her eyes. Because someone needs to watch the kids. Besides, you don't have kids or a husband, so your time isn't as valuable. You can take time off whenever you want. I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. My time isn't valuable because I'm single and childless? Your sister deserves a break from motherhood, my mother said firmly. It's the hardest job in the world, and she never gets time off. Tyler nodded in agreement. We need this, Allison. We've been under a lot of stress. Besides, it's not like you have anything better to do anyway. They all looked at me expectantly, and I realized with a chill that they had interpreted my shocked silence as agreement. They genuinely believed I would rearrange my entire life, sacrifice my paid time off, and potentially jeopardize my job to provide 2 weeks of childcare so they could enjoy a Hawaiian vacation they couldn't afford. A vacation they had already begun financing through fraudulent use of my information and stolen credit card. I took a moment to collect myself, fighting the urge to scream. Instead, I sat down across from them and spoke as calmly as I could. I understand that you're excited about this trip, but there are several problems here that we need to address. First, I cannot take 2 weeks off work in June. It's simply not possible with my current responsibilities. Megan's smile faltered. But you have vacation time, right? I do, I acknowledged, but I decide when and how to use it. I've already planned my time off for the year, and I need to keep some in reserve for emergencies. This is an emergency, my mother insisted. Family needs you. I shook my head. Watching your children while you take a luxury vacation is not an emergency. It's a request, one that I have every right to decline. Tyler leaned forward, his voice condescending. You can work from home while watching them. Plenty of parents did it during the pandemic. Those parents were watching their own children, not taking on someone else's full-time, I pointed out. And even they will tell you it was nearly impossible to be productive. I can't jeopardize my career for this. Your career, Megan mimicked. It's always about your precious job. Meanwhile, I've put my career on hold to raise 3 children. That was your choice, I said quietly. Just as my career is my choice. My mother gasped as if I'd said something blasphemous. Motherhood isn't a choice, it's a blessing. It's still a choice, I maintained. But that's beside the point. The second issue is that you used my address and potentially my credit information to secure this rental property. That's fraud, and it puts me at financial risk. We'll make all the payments, Tyler insisted. Your credit score just helped us get a better rate. And what happens if you can't make the payments? The collection agencies will come after me, I said. Not to mention that you stole my credit card to book activities. Borrowed, Megan corrected again. God, why are you being such a bitch about this? After everything we've done for you. I blinked in surprise. What exactly have you done for me? This question seemed to throw her momentarily. We're your family. We've always been there for you. Been there for me how? I pressed. By constantly asking for money? By dumping your kids on me without warning? By making me feel guilty for having a successful career? You're so ungrateful, my mother spat. You have a good job and a nice home while your sister struggles with 3 children. The least you could do is help out. I have helped out, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I've given thousands of dollars that were never repaid. I've provided countless hours of free childcare. I've put my own life on hold repeatedly to bail all of you out of situations of your own making. Tyler stood up, his imposing frame looming over me. So what are you saying? You're too good for your family now. I refused to be intimidated and stood as well. I'm saying that I'm setting a boundary. I will not watch your children for 2 weeks, so you can take a vacation you can't afford. And I expect you to cancel any bookings made with my credit card immediately. Megan's face contorted with rage. You can't do this to us. We've already told the kids about Hawaii. That's not my problem, I said firmly. You should have asked me before making any plans that involved me. Family helps family, my mother repeated, her voice icy. Your sister needs this break. Then you watch the kids, I suggested. Or hire a babysitter with the money you were planning to spend on this vacation. We can't afford a babysitter for 2 weeks. Megan exclaimed, inadvertently admitting they couldn't really afford the vacation either. Then you can't afford a 2-week Hawaiian vacation, I said simply. Tyler took a step toward me, his body language threatening. Listen here, princess. We're not asking anymore. You're doing this because we're family, and that's what family does. I stood my ground, though my heart was racing. No, I'm not. And I'd like you all to leave my home now. After everything we've done for you, Megan shouted. All the times we included you in family events when you'd otherwise be alone. Inviting me to events I often end up financing is not doing me a favor, I pointed out. You think you're so much better than us with your fancy job, Tyler sneered. But we all know you're just a sad, lonely woman who'll die alone because you're too selfish to care about anyone but yourself. His words stung, hitting insecurities I tried to keep buried. But I held firm. I'm not selfish for having boundaries. Now please leave. Family helps family, my mother repeated, as if saying it enough times would change my mind. I have helped, I said, repeatedly, but I won't be taken advantage of anymore. Tyler laughed harshly. Taken advantage of? You've got to be kidding me. Do you know how pathetic your life looks to everyone else? No husband, no kids, nothing but work. We're doing you a favor by letting you be part of our family. That's enough, I said, moving toward the door and opening it. Leave now or I'll call security. Megan wasn't done. You know what your problem is? You're jealous. You're jealous that I have a husband and beautiful children while you go home to an empty apartment every night. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Yes, I'm so jealous of your husband who can't hold down a job and your life that's so wonderful you need to escape from it for 2 weeks. It was a low blow, but I was beyond caring at this point. You'll regret this, Tyler warned, his voice low and menacing. We can make things very difficult for you. Are you threatening me? I asked incredulously. He's just saying you might want to reconsider, my mother interjected smoothly. After all, families should stick together. I held the door wider. I'm not reconsidering. Please leave now. As they gathered their things, I added, and I expect that rental booking using my address to be canceled by tomorrow. If I find out you've used my personal information for anything else, I'll report it as identity theft. Megan paused at the door, her face a mask of fury. You know what? I've always known you were selfish, but I never realized just how cold you really are. I feel sorry for you, Allison. Truly. With those parting words, they finally left. I closed the door behind them, leaning against it as my legs threatened to give way. The confrontation had left me shaking, but for the first time in years, I felt something unexpected breaking through the anxiety and guilt, relief. The relief was short-lived. Less than an hour later, my doorbell rang incessantly, followed by pounding that threatened to crack the wood. When I checked the peephole, I saw Megan, Tyler, and my mother again, their faces contorted with anger. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. What now? Megan thrust her phone in my face. On the screen was an email from the vacation rental company. Booking canceled. Failed credit verification. What did you do? She demanded, her voice trembling with rage. I didn't do anything, I replied honestly. But it looks like the rental company realized something wasn't right with your application. You called them, didn't you? Tyler accused. You told them we used your address without permission. I haven't had time to call anyone, I said. But using my address without my consent was wrong, and you know it. My mother pushed past me into the apartment. We have to fix this right now. The children are so excited about Hawaii. We can't disappoint them. That's not my problem, I repeated, growing tired of the entire situation. You made plans you couldn't afford and tried to involve me without my consent. These are the consequences. Megan followed our mother inside, with Tyler close behind. I felt cornered in my own home, but stood my ground. You have to call them, Megan insisted. Tell them it was a misunderstanding and that you approve the use of your address. I shook my head. No, I won't do that. It would be lying, and it could constitute fraud. It's only fraud if someone reports it, Tyler scoffed. Don't be so dramatic. I'm an accountant, I reminded him. I understand financial regulations better than you do. What you're asking me to do is illegal. Megan's face flushed with anger. So what? You're going to let your niece and nephews down because of some stupid technicality? I'm not letting anyone down, I said firmly. You created the situation, not me. After everything we've done for you, Megan screamed, her voice rising to a pitch that made me wince. What exactly have you done for me? I asked again, genuinely curious what they believed they had contributed to my life. We're your family, my mother shouted, as if that alone was a contribution. That's not doing something for me, I pointed out. That's just a relationship status. We've included you in holidays, Megan sputtered. We've let you be aunt to my children. Let me. I repeated incredulously. You mean when you drop them off without warning and disappear for hours? That's not letting me be an aunt. That's using me as free childcare. See? This is exactly your problem, my mother said, shaking her head in disgust. You view spending time with family as a burden rather than a blessing. I love spending time with my niece and nephews, I clarified. What I don't love is being taken advantage of, having my boundaries ignored, and being treated like a resource rather than a person. Tyler moved closer, his bulk intimidating in my small living room. Just make the call to the rental company. Fix this. No, I said simply. I won't. You owe us. Megan screamed, and before I could react, she slapped me hard across the face. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. My cheek stung, and tears sprang to my eyes from the physical shock. I raised my hand to the burning skin, staring at my sister in disbelief. What happened next was even more stunning. My mother laughed, a sharp, mean laugh that cut through the silence. Maybe that will knock some sense into you. Tyler didn't laugh, but he smirked, leaning down to whisper, we can make things very difficult for you if you don't cooperate. Very difficult. In that moment, time seemed to slow down. I saw my sister's face, still contorted with rage, but now with a hint of satisfaction at having hurt me. I saw my mother's amusement at my pain. I saw Tyler's threatening posture and the menace in his eyes. And suddenly I saw something else, a pattern that had been present my entire adult life, but that I had refused to acknowledge. This wasn't just family members asking for help. This was financial and emotional abuse. The unauthorized use of my address and credit card wasn't just an overstep, it was identity theft. The slap wasn't just my sister losing her temper, it was assault. As if watching a movie of my own life, memories flashed before me, Megan borrowing money for emergencies that were never repaid, my mother guilting me into paying bills she could have managed if she'd budgeted properly. Tyler's veiled threats whenever I hesitated to help, the constant invasion of my time and space without regard for my needs or feelings. I'd normalized it all because they were family. I'd told myself it was temporary, that someday they would get on their feet and things would be different. But in that crystallizing moment after the slap, I realized the truth. Nothing would ever change unless I changed it. I took a deep, steadying breath and lowered my hand from my cheek. When I spoke, my voice was calm and clear. I want all of you to leave my home right now. Not until you fix this. Megan demanded, still seething. You hit me, I stated flatly. You committed assault in my own home, and you think I'm going to help you now? Don't be so dramatic, my mother scoffed. It was just a slap. Sisters fight all the time. We're not fighting, I clarified. I set a boundary and Megan responded with physical violence. That's assault, not a sisterly disagreement. Are you threatening to call the police on your own sister? Tyler asked, his voice dangerously low. I met his gaze steadily. If you don't leave right now, yes. That's exactly what I'll do. You wouldn't dare, my mother said, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. Try me, I challenged, pulling out my phone. They exchanged glances, suddenly unsure. This isn't over, Megan warned as they finally moved toward the door. You've ruined everything and you'll regret it. I said nothing, just held the door open as they filed out. Tyler paused on his way past me. We know where you live, where you work, he said quietly. And we know all your personal information. Think about that before you do something you'll regret. The threat hung in the air between us. I should have been terrified, but instead, I felt oddly calm. Get out, I said one final time and closed the door firmly behind them. I stood with my back against the door for several minutes, listening to their angry voices fade as they left the building. My cheek still stung and my heart raced, but my mind was surprisingly clear. A decision had crystallized in those moments after the slap, a decision that had been building for years without my conscious awareness. I was done. Completely and irrevocably done. I walked purposefully to my bedroom and pulled my suitcase from the closet. I wasn't sure exactly where I was going yet, but I knew I couldn't stay here tonight. They had a key and Tyler's threats still echoed in my ears. I needed to be somewhere safe while I figured out my next steps. As I methodically folded clothes into the suitcase, I heard my phone buzzing with incoming texts. I glanced at the screen to see Megan's name, but I didn't read the messages. Whatever justifications or accusations she was sending would only cloud my judgment now. I packed only essentials. Enough clothing for a few days, toiletries, my laptop, and chargers. Then I moved on to gathering important documents. I collected my passport, birth certificate, social security card, and financial records, placing them securely in my laptop bag. I added the few pieces of jewelry I had inherited from my grandmother, items of more sentimental than monetary value, but things I couldn't bear to lose if my family decided to retaliate by entering my apartment again. While packing, I heard more knocking at my door, but I ignored it. Through the peephole, I saw my mother standing alone, probably sent back as the reasonable one to convince me to change my mind. I returned to my bedroom and continued preparing. With my essential items gathered, I took a moment to look around my condo. Despite living here for 3 years, there were surprisingly few items I felt attached to. The furniture had been chosen for practicality rather than sentiment. The artwork on the walls had been selected to match the decor rather than to express my personality. Even the books on my shelves were mostly professional references rather than stories I loved. It struck me that I had built a life designed to serve others rather than myself. My home was a convenient place for family to drop in, my career a reliable source of financial support for their emergencies, my time an endless resource they could tap whenever needed. But what did I want? What brought me joy? I realized with a pang that I hardly knew anymore. This revelation only strengthened my resolve. I finished packing, then pulled out my phone and began the process of reclaiming my life, one step at a time. First, I sent a text to my friend Stephanie, family emergency. Need a place to stay for a few days. Can I use your guest room? Her response came quickly, of course. Everything okay? I'll explain when I see you. Thanks, I replied. Next, I opened my banking app and went through each account, canceling every automatic payment I had set up to help my family. The monthly transfer to my mother's account for emergency fund canceled. The automatic payment toward Megan and Tyler's utilities canceled. The recurring deposit to Ethan's tuition fund paused, pending a conversation with him. I moved on to my credit cards, logging into each account to check for unauthorized charges. Sure enough, I found several recent transactions for airlines, tour companies, and restaurants in Hawaii. I called the credit card company immediately. I need to report fraudulent charges and request a new card, I explained to the representative. I'm sorry to hear that, Ms. Parker. Can you identify which charges you believe are fraudulent? I listed the Hawaii-related expenses, explaining that my card had been taken without my permission and used by a family member. Would you like to file a formal dispute and potentially press charges? The representative asked. I hesitated only briefly. Yes, I would. And I need to make sure my card is canceled immediately. After securing my credit cards, I called the 3 major credit bureaus to place a fraud alert on my credit reports. This would make it harder for anyone to open new accounts in my name without additional verification. I have reason to believe my personal information may have been used without my consent, I explained to each bureau representative. I need to protect myself from potential identity theft. With my financial security addressed for the moment, I turned to documenting what had happened. I took photos of my cheek, which now showed a faint red mark from Megan's slap. I wrote down a detailed account of the conversation, the physical assault, and Tyler's threats, dating and signing the document. I then opened my email and composed a message to myself, creating a time-stamped record of events that included all the details I could remember. I attached photos of my face and a list of the fraudulent charges I had discovered. Having this documentation might prove crucial if the situation escalated further. As I worked through these protective measures, my phone continued to buzz with incoming calls and texts. I silenced it without looking at the messages. Whatever crisis my family was experiencing as a result of their canceled vacation plans was not my emergency to solve. Instead, I sent an email to my apartment management company. Due to safety concerns, I need to request an immediate lock change on my unit. My spare key was used without authorization, and I have concerns about unauthorized entry. Additionally, please update your security protocols to not allow entry to anyone claiming to be my family member without my explicit permission. With these immediate protective measures in place, I did one final scan of my apartment, looking for anything else of importance I might need. My gaze fell on a family photo on my bookshelf, the 5 of us at Thanksgiving 2 years ago, smiling as if everything was perfect. I left it behind. I shouldered my bags and walked out without a backward glance. In the elevator down to the parking garage, I felt a curious mixture of emotions: grief for the family relationships I was leaving behind, anxiety about the uncertain future, but predominantly an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first. As I loaded my car and pulled out of the garage, my phone buzzed again with an incoming call from my mother. I connected it to my car's Bluetooth system and answered, putting her on speaker. Allison, thank goodness you picked up. We need to talk about what happened. There's nothing to discuss, I said calmly, keeping my eyes on the road. Of course there is. Megan is very sorry for losing her temper. We all said things we didn't mean. Now, about the Hawaii trip. Goodbye, Mom, I interrupted and ended the call. I blocked her number, then did the same for Megan and Tyler. I would unblock them eventually, once I had established my new boundaries and was emotionally ready to interact with them again, if that day ever came. But for now, I needed space and silence to rebuild my life on my own terms. As I drove toward Stephanie's house, I felt lighter than I had in years. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it was truly mine to choose. I spent that first night at Stephanie's in a fog of emotional exhaustion, but also strange exhilaration. When I finally told her everything that had happened, her response was validating in a way I hadn't expected. Allison, I've been worried about your family situation for years, she admitted. The way they treat you isn't normal or healthy. I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself. The next morning, I woke to dozens of missed calls and unread messages from unknown numbers, my family using friends' phones to try to reach me after I'd blocked them. I deleted them all without reading them. Instead, I focused on creating a plan for moving forward. My first stop was my bank, where I met with a personal banker to explain the situation. I need to ensure my accounts are secure, I explained. Family members have had access to my financial information, and I'm concerned about unauthorized transactions. The banker helped me close my existing accounts and open new ones with enhanced security features. We went through recent transactions to identify any additional suspicious activity. There's a pattern of large withdrawals to the same accounts over the past few years, he noted, showing me the transaction history. Were these authorized by you? I nodded reluctantly. Yes, those were loans to family members. But I need to make sure no new transactions can occur without my explicit approval. Next, I visited a lawyer who specialized in identity theft and family law. The consultation fee was steep, but worth every penny for the peace of mind it provided. Based on what you've told me, you have several legal issues to address, the lawyer explained. The unauthorized use of your address and credit card constitutes identity theft, even when done by family members. The physical assault, while minor in legal terms, is still assault. And the threatening behavior afterward creates a basis for a potential restraining order if needed. I don't want to press charges, I said, surprising myself with the realization that despite everything, I wasn't ready to see my family face legal consequences. I just want them to leave me alone while I figure things out. That's your choice, the lawyer assured me. But I recommend we send a formal cease and desist letter outlining the legal boundaries they've crossed and the potential consequences if the behavior continues. This creates a paper trail if things escalate. I agreed to this approach, and we drafted the letter together. It was firm but factual, listing the specific incidents of financial abuse, identity theft, physical assault, and threatening behavior, along with the relevant legal statutes they violated. It concluded with a clear statement that any further contact must be through my lawyer until I indicated otherwise. While I was still at the lawyer's office, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it. Allison? It's Ethan. My younger brother was the one family member I hadn't blocked, partly because he hadn't been involved in the Hawaii incident, and partly because our relationship had always been less fraught than my relationships with Megan and our mother. Ethan, I can't talk about this right now, I said wearily. I know. Megan told me what happened, her version, anyway. But I wanted to check if you're okay. That wasn't right, what they did. His words caught me off guard. You think they were wrong? Of course they were wrong, he said, sounding surprised that I would question it. Using your credit card without permission? Hitting you? That's messed up, Allison. Really messed up. Tears sprang to my eyes at this unexpected support. Thank you for saying that. Where are you staying? Megan and Mom went to your condo this morning, but the manager wouldn't let them in. They're pretty upset. I'm safe, I said, not willing to share my location. And I'm going to stay away for a while. I need space from all of this. I get it, Ethan said quietly. Just let me know if you need anything, okay? And for what it's worth, I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner. They do the same thing to me, you know. Not as bad, but still. This revelation didn't surprise me entirely. I'd noticed how our mother and Megan tended to manipulate Ethan as well, though in different ways than they did with me. Thank you for calling, I said sincerely. It means a lot. After ending the call with Ethan, I felt marginally better knowing I had at least one family member who understood my position. But the hardest part was still to come. The following day, while at work, I received an urgent message from the front desk. Visitors were insisting on seeing me. I already knew who it was before the receptionist described them. I'm sorry, but I can't see them, I told her. Please ask them to leave or security will need to escort them out. 20 minutes later, my boss called me into his office. Allison, is everything okay? There was an incident in the lobby. My stomach dropped. What happened? A woman claiming to be your sister caused quite a scene. Security had to remove her and a man I assume was her husband. They were shouting about you stealing from them and abandoning your family. I closed my eyes briefly, mortified. I'm so sorry. I'm dealing with a personal situation, and they're not handling it well. To my surprise, my boss was understanding. Family issues can be complicated. Do you need some time off to sort things out? I shook my head. Actually, work is the one stable thing in my life right now. I'd rather stay busy. In that case, I've instructed security not to allow them in the building. And if you need to work from home for a few days, that's fine too. His support was another unexpected gift in this difficult time. Thank you. I really appreciate that. The next escalation came in the form of social media. Megan began posting vague, but clearly targeted status updates about ungrateful family members and selfish people who abandon their nieces and nephews. Mutual friends and distant relatives began reaching out, asking what was happening. I decided not to engage with the public drama. Instead, I drafted a single, private message to the few family members and close friends whose opinions mattered to me. Some of you may have heard concerning things about me recently. I'm dealing with a difficult family situation that involves financial boundaries and personal safety. I'm taking some space for my own well-being. I appreciate your understanding and respect for my privacy during this time. Most responses were supportive, though some relatives predictably took Megan's side without hearing my perspective. A few older family members sent messages about the importance of forgiveness and family unity, clearly not understanding the severity of what had occurred. 3 days after I left my condo, I received an alarming call from my credit monitoring service. Someone had attempted to open a loan in my name. The fraud alerts I had placed prevented the application from being processed, but it was a chilling confirmation that Tyler's threats weren't empty. I called my lawyer immediately, who advised documenting this attempt and adding it to our growing file. This strengthens your case if you decide to pursue legal action, she explained. It shows a pattern of deliberate financial abuse. A week into my self-imposed exile, I took a personal day to meet with a real estate agent. I need to sell my condo and find a new place to live, I explained. Preferably in a secure building with good privacy policies. The agent didn't ask for details, just nodded professionally. I understand. Security is increasingly important to many clients. Let me show you some options that might work for your situation. By the end of that day, I had listed my condo for sale and put a deposit on a 1-bedroom apartment in a building with 24-hour security, no exception visitor policies, and a management company that took privacy seriously. It was slightly farther from my office, but worth the additional commute for the peace of mind it provided. As I settled into this new chapter of my life, the harassment from my family gradually evolved. The initial fury gave way to guilt-tripping, with my mother leaving tearful voicemails on my work phone, the one number I couldn't change, about how I was tearing the family apart and breaking her heart. Megan's approach shifted from anger to fake reconciliation attempts. "We miss you," she texted from new numbers I hadn't yet blocked. "The kids keep asking where Aunt Allison is. Can't we just talk?" Tyler's messages remained threatening, but became more subtle. "Hope your new place has good security," one text read, making my blood run cold. How did he know I was moving? I forwarded each message to my lawyer without responding. The cease and desist letters had been delivered, and each contact was now documented as a violation of the boundaries we had legally established. 2 weeks after the incident, the credit card company completed their investigation and reversed all the fraudulent charges related to the Hawaii vacation. They also provided documentation that would be useful if I ever decided to pursue criminal charges for credit card fraud. Around the same time, I received an unexpected email from Ethan containing screenshots of conversations between our mother and Megan discussing other financial schemes they had been running using my information. "I found these on Mom's iPad when she asked me to help her with something," Ethan wrote. "I thought you should know. They've been taking out small loans in your name for over a year. I'm so sorry, Allison. I had no idea it was this bad." The screenshots revealed a pattern of systematic financial abuse that went far beyond what I had imagined. Small personal loans, utility accounts, even a cell phone plan, all opened using my information without my knowledge. No wonder my credit score had mysteriously dipped despite my careful financial management. With this new evidence, I finally filed a police report for identity theft. I didn't name names in the report, simply stating that my personal information had been used without my consent to open multiple accounts. This created an official record without immediately triggering a criminal investigation against my family members, a line I still wasn't quite ready to cross. 3 weeks into my new life, I was having dinner with Stephanie when she asked the question I had been avoiding. Do you think you'll ever reconcile with them? I set down my fork, considering the question seriously. I don't know, I admitted. Right now, I can't imagine a relationship that wouldn't just fall back into the same toxic patterns. They don't see anything wrong with what they did. In their minds, I'm the villain in this story. And what do you think? She pressed gently. I think I finally understand that I deserve better, I said slowly. I deserve relationships that are reciprocal, not exploitative. I deserve to set boundaries without being punished for it. And if my family can't offer that, then maybe we don't have a place in each other's lives right now. It wasn't a final decision about cutting ties forever, but it was an honest assessment of where I stood. For the first time, I was prioritizing my own well-being over family obligations, and despite the pain and upheaval, it felt unquestionably right. 6 months after the slap that changed everything, I stood in my new apartment, looking out over the city as the sun set. The view wasn't as nice as from my old condo, but the sense of security more than made up for it. The building's strict security protocols meant that no one, not even family, could access my home without my explicit permission. It was a physical boundary that reinforced the emotional ones I had been working so hard to establish. My journey of healing had been neither quick nor linear. There were days when the guilt nearly overwhelmed me, when cultural expectations about family loyalty made me question my decisions. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I had overreacted, if I should have tried harder to work things out. But those moments became less frequent as time passed and as I continued my weekly therapy sessions. What you experienced was financial abuse and emotional manipulation, my therapist had explained during our first session. The fact that it came from family members doesn't make it any less harmful. In fact, it often makes it more damaging because of the trust involved. Through therapy, I began to recognize patterns that had been present my entire life. The way my mother had always favored Megan, making me feel I needed to earn love through achievement and compliance. How Megan had learned to weaponize her role as a mother to manipulate others. How I had internalized the belief that my needs were less important than everyone else's. Boundaries aren't selfish, my therapist reminded me regularly. They're necessary for healthy relationships. People who respect you will respect your boundaries. My financial recovery had been more straightforward, though not without challenges. I had worked with credit bureaus to dispute fraudulent accounts and slowly rebuilt my credit score. I had created a detailed budget that, for the first time, didn't include regular loans to family members. The result was surprising. Within months, I had more savings than I'd accumulated in years of higher earning. I had maintained my no-contact policy with my mother and Megan, though their attempts to reach me had continued for months. The cease and desist letter had eventually stopped Tyler's more threatening messages, especially after my lawyer sent a follow-up warning that included some of the evidence we had gathered. My relationship with Ethan had evolved into something cautiously positive. After several honest conversations, we had established a new dynamic based on mutual respect rather than the dysfunctional patterns of our childhood. I've been enabling them too, he admitted during one of our monthly lunch meetings. But seeing how they treated you and how much better you're doing now made me realize I need to set my own boundaries. He had started therapy as well and had moved out of our mother's house into his own apartment. He was focusing on finishing his degree without the constant drama that had previously derailed his efforts. Mom and Megan still talk about you all the time, he told me during our most recent lunch. They've created this whole narrative where you had some kind of breakdown and abandoned the family for no reason. It's like they've completely rewritten history. I wasn't surprised. That's easier than acknowledging what they did. Do you think you'll ever talk to them again? He asked. I considered the question carefully. Maybe someday if they showed genuine change and respect for boundaries. But I'm not holding my breath, and I'm not putting my life on hold waiting for that to happen. My social circle had shifted dramatically over these months. Some friends who had known my family couldn't understand my decision and gradually drifted away. Others revealed themselves to be true supporters, standing by me even when they didn't know all the details. I had also joined a support group for survivors of family financial abuse, discovering that my experience was far from unique. The stories shared in that circle helped me realize that walking away wasn't a failure on my part. Sometimes it was the only healthy option. Professionally, I had continued to thrive. Without the constant drain of family emergencies and unexpected childcare duties, I had more energy and focus for my career. I had taken on challenging projects that previously would have seemed impossible to manage alongside my family obligations. My boss had noticed the change, recently mentioning me as a candidate for a senior position that would open next year. Perhaps most importantly, I had begun to rediscover myself beyond my role as the family problem solver. I had taken up hiking on weekends, joined a book club that actually discussed books rather than gossip, and even started dating again, something that had been nearly impossible with my previous, unpredictable schedule. My latest date had been with Ben, a kind environmental engineer I'd met through the book club. When he asked about my family, I had given a simple, honest answer: we're not close right now. I'm focusing on building healthy relationships. He had nodded without pressing for details. Family can be complicated. Mine too, in different ways. That response, understanding without judgment, felt refreshingly normal after years of explaining and justifying my family's chaotic dynamics. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I turned away from the window and looked around my apartment. Unlike my old place, every item here had been chosen with intention. The artwork reflected my actual tastes rather than what would look appropriate for entertaining. The furniture was arranged for my comfort rather than to accommodate unexpected visitors. Even my schedule was now my own, no more dropped-off children or emergency family meetings disrupting my plans. The pain of losing my family connections hadn't disappeared entirely. There were still holidays and milestones that triggered grief for what could have been. I missed my niece and nephews, though I had sent them birthday gifts through Ethan to maintain some connection without engaging with their parents. But alongside that occasional sadness was something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. The constant anxiety about what crisis would come next had faded. The reflexive guilt whenever I prioritized myself had diminished. The walking on eggshells feeling that had dominated family interactions was gone. I had learned that forgiveness didn't necessarily mean reconciliation. I could forgive my family for their actions, understanding that they were operating from their own wounds and limitations, without putting myself back in a position to be hurt again. That forgiveness was for my benefit, not theirs, allowing me to release the anger and resentment that might otherwise have consumed me. I had also learned that family isn't defined solely by blood. True family consists of people who respect your boundaries, celebrate your successes without jealousy, support you through difficulties without keeping score, and love you without conditions. Some of those people might be biological relatives, but many might not be. Most importantly, I had learned that walking away from toxic relationships, even family ones, wasn't selfish or weak. Sometimes it was the strongest, most self-respecting choice available. The cultural expectation that family ties should be maintained at all costs ignored the reality that some family dynamics were fundamentally unhealthy and resistant to change. As I prepared for bed that night, my phone pinged with a text from Stephanie. Proud of how far you've come this year. Dinner next weekend to celebrate? I smiled and replied affirmatively, grateful for the genuine friendship that had helped sustain me through this challenging transition. The journey hadn't been easy, and it wasn't over. There would likely be more difficult moments ahead, more attempts by my family to pull me back into old patterns, more occasions when I would question my decisions. But I had found a strength I didn't know I possessed, the strength to say no to abuse and yes to my own well-being. That slap across my face had been painful, but it had woken me from years of accepting the unacceptable. Walking away had been terrifying but necessary. And rebuilding my life on my own terms had been the most empowering experience of my adult years. If you're watching this and recognizing similar patterns in your own family relationships, know that you're not alone. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential for healthy relationships. You deserve respect, honesty, and kindness, especially from those who claim to love you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and ultimately for them, is to walk away until real change is possible. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? What helped you through that process? Please like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult situations, and share with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you deserve relationships that build you up, not break you down. Audrey, 28, here. Last December, I reluctantly attended my sister Michelle's company holiday party. Despite her criticism, I wore my favorite outfit and brought my resume. Michelle had promised to help me land a position at her marketing firm, even though she constantly mocked my online graphic design degree. That night, in front of her laughing colleagues, she called me just to tag along and tossed my resume into the trash. Then her boss Nathan walked in, wrapped his arm around me, and said, "There you are, beloved wife." The room went silent. Before I tell you how we got to this shocking moment, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever had a family member underestimate you, and subscribe to join our community of resilient people who turned painful moments into powerful lessons. Michelle and I grew up just 3 years apart, but sometimes it felt like we existed in completely different worlds. From elementary school, Michelle was the textbook definition of the golden child in our family. She brought home straight A's without seeming to try, captained the debate team, and was class president 3 years running. Teachers would light up when they realized they were getting another Phillips girl in their classroom, only to have their expressions shift slightly when they realized I wasn't quite the academic powerhouse my sister had been. It wasn't that I didn't try. I just processed information differently. While Michelle excelled at memorization and test-taking, I was more hands-on and creative. I could spend hours designing elaborate dioramas for book reports or creating digital art projects when we finally got our first family computer. But those talents didn't translate to the standardized measurements of success that seemed to matter most. "Why can't you focus like your sister?" became a familiar refrain at our dinner table. My parents didn't mean to compare us constantly, but the contrast was unavoidable in their minds. Michelle received scholarship offers from 3 universities by junior year, while I struggled to maintain AB average despite hours of studying. "Don't worry about Audrey," Michelle would say with that particular smile of hers. "She's just more of a free spirit." The words sounded kind, but they always landed with the sting of a consolation prize. After high school, our paths diverged even further. While Michelle headed off to Emerson College with a partial scholarship and generous parental support, I simply couldn't afford traditional college. Instead, I moved into a tiny studio apartment with peeling wallpaper and a temperamental radiator, working as a barista in the mornings and a restaurant hostess at night. Those first few years of adulthood were a blur of double shifts, instant ramen dinners, and falling asleep with my uniform still on. Dating happened in sporadic bursts of optimism that usually ended in disappointment. There was Jacob, the aspiring musician who borrowed my rent money to buy equipment, Trevor, the corporate analyst who found my lack of degree charming until he wanted to introduce me to his friends, and Russell, the seemingly perfect guy who ghosted me after meeting my accomplished sister at a family dinner. Meanwhile, Michelle's life unfolded like a carefully curated Instagram feed. She graduated with honors, landed an entry-level position at Hammond and Walsh, one of the most prestigious marketing firms in Boston, and steadily climbed the corporate ladder. Within 5 years, she had her own office, a team reporting to her, and an apartment in one of those renovated factory buildings with exposed brick walls and stainless steel appliances. When I turned 25, I made a decision that would change everything. I'd been saving carefully for 3 years and decided to invest in myself by pursuing an online degree in graphic design. The program was accredited and allowed me to continue working while studying during whatever hours I could manage. An online degree? Michelle had questioned when I shared my news at our parents' anniversary dinner. I guess that's one way to go. Hopefully employers won't toss your resume directly into the trash. She laughed as if she'd made a harmless joke, and our parents uncomfortably joined in. That comment hurt, but I persevered. For 2.5 years, I balanced full-time work with late-night study sessions. I built a portfolio of designs, learned industry-standard software, and even secured a few freelance projects through networking and online forums. When I finally earned my degree, I celebrated alone in my apartment with a cupcake and a single candle. Michelle sent a text. Congrats on finishing internet school. Let me know when you find a real job. Our interactions as adults remained minimal and mostly occurred during obligatory family gatherings. Each time, Michelle would offer those signature backhanded compliments. That's such a cute outfit for someone on a budget, or your hair looks so much better than last time, or it's amazing what you've managed to do without connections. I tried maintaining peace by smiling through gritted teeth and changing the subject. Our parents had enough stress with Dad's recent health issues, and creating family drama seemed selfish. So I swallowed my hurt feelings and reminded myself that Michelle's approval wasn't necessary for my happiness. Then came last Thanksgiving. Michelle dominated the conversation with stories about her recent promotion to senior marketing director. Between servings of mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce, she mentioned her company was expanding and hiring for several positions in the creative department. They're desperate for fresh talent, she said, glancing at me with an unreadable expression. The pay is competitive and the benefits are amazing. Health insurance, 401k matching, the works. For the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope regarding my relationship with my sister. Maybe this was her way of extending an olive branch. Maybe she finally recognized that I had valuable skills to offer. Do you think I should apply? I asked cautiously. Michelle took a long sip of wine before answering. You know what? You should. Send me your resume, and I'll make sure it gets to the right people. That night, I drove home with a strange mix of excitement and anxiety churning in my stomach. Could this be my opportunity to finally prove myself? Or was I setting myself up for another disappointment? The moment I got home from Thanksgiving dinner, I threw myself into researching everything about Hammond and Walsh marketing. I stayed up until 3 a.m. scrolling through their website, social media accounts, and employee reviews on Glassdoor. Their client list was impressive, featuring everything from local artisanal coffee shops to national retail chains. Their design work had won multiple industry awards, and their company culture emphasized innovation and fresh perspectives. This felt like the perfect opportunity to prove that my unconventional path had value. My online degree had actually given me exposure to cutting-edge digital marketing techniques that some traditional programs hadn't yet incorporated into their curriculum. My years of customer service had taught me how to understand client needs and communicate effectively across different personality types. I spent the entire weekend revamping my portfolio, selecting projects that showcase my versatility and technical skills. I updated my resume, carefully highlighting my freelance work for a local bookstore whose social media graphics had increased their engagement by 47%. I included the branding package I'd created for my friend Jessica's bakery business, which had been featured in a regional small business magazine. I emphasized courses I'd taken in user experience design and digital marketing analytics, areas that I knew were increasingly important in the industry. Each night that week, I practiced potential interview questions in front of my bathroom mirror. Yes, my degree is from an online program, but that allowed me to simultaneously gain real-world experience while studying current design trends. I rehearsed explanations about project timelines, collaboration methods, and how I handled difficult clients. I researched salary ranges, so I would be prepared for any compensation discussions. The Thursday before I planned to submit my application, I called Michelle to let her know my materials were almost ready. I've been working on everything, I told her. My portfolio is updated, and my resume highlights all my relevant experience. Great, Michelle replied, sounding genuinely interested. You know what? Instead of sending it through the online portal, why don't you give it to me directly? I can hand deliver it to HR and put in a good word. Really? I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. Of course. That's what sisters are for, right? And listen, we're having our holiday party next Friday at the Grand Meridian Hotel. You should come as my guest. It's the perfect opportunity to network with a team informally before any interviews. Are you sure that's appropriate? I asked. Absolutely. Lots of people bring family members. It's a great way for potential candidates to get a feel for the company culture. Plus, the creative director always attends, and he has the final say on all new hires. After we hung up, I danced around my apartment, hardly believing this turn of events. Maybe Michelle had finally grown past our childhood rivalry. Maybe she was genuinely proud of what I'd accomplished and wanted to help me succeed. For the first time in years, I felt like we might have a chance at a real sister relationship. The next day, I splurged on a new outfit for the party, something that balanced professionalism with personality, a tailored burgundy blazer, black dress pants, and a silk blouse with a subtle geometric pattern that I thought represented my design aesthetic. I found a pair of low heels that were stylish yet comfortable enough to stand in for hours of networking. I spent Saturday getting my hair trimmed and styled, opting for a sleek, shoulder-length cut that framed my face professionally. I practiced introducing myself to imaginary executives while applying makeup that enhanced my features without being too dramatic for a corporate environment. As the party approached, my excitement continued to build. I imagined confidently discussing design trends with senior staff members. I picture Michelle proudly introducing me as her talented sister. I visualized the impressed expressions when people connected my portfolio work to my face. I'm Audrey Phillips. I practice saying, I specialize in integrated branding and digital experience design. My approach combines data-driven strategy with creative execution to build meaningful connections between brands and their audiences. The night before the party, I meticulously prepared my materials, 5 copies of my resume printed on high-quality paper, business cards with a QR code linking to my online portfolio, and my tablet loaded with project examples in case anyone wanted to see my work on the spot. I also downloaded the company's most recent marketing campaigns to reference during conversations. Friday morning, I woke up feeling a strange mix of confidence and nerves. This could be the beginning of a whole new chapter in my life, both professionally and personally. Maybe Michelle and I could even grab lunch together sometimes if we worked in the same building. Maybe we'd finally develop the kind of supportive adult relationship I'd always hoped for. As I drove to the Grand Meridian Hotel that evening, my car filled with the scent of the vanilla perfume I dabbed on my wrists. I rehearsed conversation starters and reminded myself to smile, make eye contact, and ask thoughtful questions. This was my chance to show everyone, including Michelle, that my path had led me exactly where I needed to be. I pulled into the hotel parking garage at 7:45 p.m., giving myself a few minutes to check my appearance one final time. As I applied a fresh coat of lipstick, I took a deep breath and whispered to my reflection, "You've earned this opportunity. Now go show them what you can do." The Grand Meridian Hotel lobby gleamed with marble floors and crystal chandeliers, the kind of luxury that made me intensely aware of every step I took. I followed the sound of music and conversation to a ballroom where Hammond and Walsh's holiday celebration was in full swing. The space had been transformed with elegant winter-themed decorations, ice sculptures reflecting the blue and silver lighting, and waiters circulating with champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres that looked too artistic to eat. I scanned the room for Michelle, suddenly feeling out of place despite my careful preparation. Clusters of well-dressed professionals engaged in animated conversations, their laughter carrying across the room with the confidence of people who belonged in spaces like this. I recognized some faces from the company website. The silver-haired CFO talking near the bar, the head of client relations gesturing expressively by a tall window, a group of account managers I'd seen in team photos on Instagram. After 15 minutes of awkward hovering, I finally spotted Michelle across the room. She wore a designer black dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, her hair styled in an elegant updo that emphasized her sharp cheekbones. She was engaged in conversation with 4 colleagues, all holding wine glasses and nodding at whatever point she was making. I approached cautiously, portfolio clutched against my chest like a shield. Michelle noticed me and paused mid-sentence, her smile freezing in place. "Audrey," she said, her voice slightly higher than normal. "You made it. Thanks for inviting me," I replied, trying to match her professional tone. Michelle gave me a quick, perfunctory hug, then turned to her colleagues. "Everyone, this is my younger sister I mentioned." No introduction of their names or positions. No mention of my qualifications or the job openings. Just my younger sister, as if that was my only relevant identity. "I love your blazer," Michelle continued, reaching out to adjust my collar in a way that felt maternal rather than sisterly. "It's so bold for an interview setting. But that's Audrey for you, always making unique choices." The woman to Michelle's right, wearing an impeccable gray suit, raised an eyebrow. "Interview setting? Is Hammond and Walsh becoming a family business now?" "Oh, Audrey's just exploring options," Michelle replied with a dismissive wave. "She's been doing some freelance stuff since finishing her online program." The way she emphasized online program made it sound like I'd ordered a degree from a late-night infomercial rather than completed an accredited education. "I actually specialize in integrated branding and digital experience design," I interjected, trying to redirect the conversation to my qualifications. "I'd love to talk about the work your team has been doing with responsive design across platforms." The group exchanged glances that I couldn't quite interpret. Michelle quickly jumped in before anyone could respond. "Did you bring your resume like we discussed?" she asked, extending her hand. "Yes, of course." I carefully extracted one of the copies from my portfolio and handed it to her, feeling a spark of hope as she took it. Michelle held the paper with 2 fingers as if it might contaminate her, making a show of examining it. Her eyes widened theatrically at certain points, and she let out small, sounds that drew her colleagues' attention. "Virtual Graphic Design Academy," she read aloud, highlighting the name of my school with obvious disdain. "Is that one of those places that advertises during daytime television?" "It's fully accredited," I said, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. "They have industry professionals as instructors and partnerships with major tech companies for internship placements." "Internships," repeated the man to Michelle's left with a smirk. "At your age? Experience is experience," I replied, struggling to maintain my composure. "And I've built a strong portfolio of real-world client work." Michelle continued scanning the resume, her expression growing, increasingly amused. 3 years as a barista, 2 as a restaurant hostess. Oh, and this freelance work for Jessica's Bakery? Is that your friend with the cupcake Instagram account? Her business has grown 200% since our rebranding, I said firmly. And they were featured in New England Small Business Monthly. How quaint, Michelle replied. Then, turning to her colleagues, she added, Audrey's always been creative with how she presents things. Remember when I said my sister wanted to come tonight? She's really just a tag-along to see how the professionals do it. The group chuckled, and I felt my carefully constructed confidence beginning to crumble. I'm not a tag-along, I protested, my voice embarrassingly small. You said this would be a networking opportunity for the open positions. Michelle's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. Oh, Audrey. There's networking, and then there's being realistic about qualifications. Before I could respond, she held up my resume for the group to see, pointing to various sections like a teacher highlighting mistakes on a failed assignment. Online degree, minimal relevant experience, no agency background. She shook her head with exaggerated disappointment. Then, with a dramatic flick of her wrist, she tossed my resume into a nearby trash can. The paper made a soft sound as it hit the bottom, but in my ears, it thundered like a gavel. Let's be honest, Michelle said as her colleagues erupted into laughter. HR would just do the same thing. I'm saving everyone time. The room seemed to spin around me. I could feel dozens of eyes watching the scene unfold, witnessing my humiliation in real time. My throat tightened painfully as I fought back tears, determined not to compound my embarrassment by crying in front of these strangers. Every insecurity I'd ever felt came rushing back in that moment. Every time I'd been compared to Michelle and found wanting. Every doubt I'd pushed aside during those late nights of studying. Every rejection letter from jobs I'd applied for. It all converged into a crushing weight on my chest. The worst part wasn't even the public rejection or the cruel laughter. It was the realization that Michelle had never intended to help me. This had been orchestrated from the beginning, an elaborate setup to put me in my place, to reinforce the hierarchy that had defined our relationship since childhood. She had invited me here not to open a door, but to slam one in my face. As I stood frozen in shock, a waiter passed with a tray of champagne. Michelle casually took a glass and raised it in a mock toast. "To knowing your limits," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I wanted to disappear, to dissolve into the marble floor beneath my feet. Instead, I remained rooted in place, my portfolio clutched against my chest like the last shield protecting my dignity, as the laughter of strangers echoed in my ears. I mumbled an excuse about needing the restroom and fled the scene, my vision blurred with unshed tears. The women's bathroom was mercifully empty, its elegant lighting and marble countertops a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I gripped the edge of a sink, staring at my reflection as I took deep, shuddering breaths. "Keep it together," I whispered to myself. "Don't give her the satisfaction." The bathroom door swung open, and I quickly pretended to adjust my makeup. Two women from the party entered, not noticing me in the corner stall. "Did you see what just happened with Michelle Phillips and her sister?" the first woman asked, reapplying her lipstick.
God, yes.
"So uncomfortable," the second replied. But honestly, not surprising coming from Michelle. I froze, listening intently. Remember what she did to Brianna in the Cooper account presentation? Took all her ideas, then excluded her from the meeting. Or how about when she accidentally sent Thomas the wrong mock-up before the client review? He looked completely unprepared. Classic Michelle, always stepping on others to climb higher. They continued their conversation, unaware that the subject's sister was absorbing every word. When they left, I remained motionless, processing this new information. Michelle hadn't just betrayed me. Apparently, this was a pattern of behavior. A strange calm settled over me. I had two choices: slink away in humiliation or stand my ground. The old Audrey would have chosen escape, would have nursed her wounds in private, and added this to the litany of ways Michelle had made me feel inferior. But I wasn't that person anymore. The past 3 years had taught me resilience. I'd worked full-time while completing my degree. I'd built a portfolio from nothing. I'd learned to believe in my abilities despite constant dismissal from my family. I squared my shoulders, dried my eyes, and walked back into the ballroom with newfound determination. I spotted Michelle by the bar, now holding court with an even larger group. With deliberate steps, I approached and gently touched her elbow. "Michelle, can I speak with you for a moment? Privately?" She turned, surprise flickering across her features before her composed mask returned. "I'm in the middle of something, Audrey. It will only take a minute," I insisted, keeping my voice steady. With visible reluctance, she excused herself and followed me to a relatively quiet corner near a large potted plant. "What is it?" she asked impatiently. "If you're upset about what happened, it was just a joke. Everyone's having fun. Why did you invite me here tonight?" I asked directly. "Was it just to humiliate me?" Michelle rolled her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic. I thought you should see what a professional environment is really like. You've always had these unrealistic expectations." "Unrealistic," I repeated incredulously. "I worked incredibly hard for my degree while supporting myself. I've built a client base from scratch. How is wanting an opportunity to interview unrealistic?" "Look," Michelle said, lowering her voice, "you've always had it easy. Mom and Dad never pressured you the way they did me. You got to find yourself and explore your creativity, while I was expected to excel at everything. And now you think you can just waltz into my company and be on the same level as people who've paid their dues." The unfairness of her perspective was staggering. "Had it easy? Are you serious?" I worked double shifts to afford rent while you had your education funded. I taught myself design skills before I could afford classes. I've been listening to comparisons to you my entire life. That's not my fault, Michelle snapped, her voice rising slightly. I can't help it if I set a standard you couldn't meet. This isn't about standards, I said, struggling to keep my voice level. This is about you deliberately sabotaging me. You never intended to help me get this job. You invited me here to put me in my place. Several nearby guests glanced our way, sensing the tension. Keep your voice down, Michelle hissed. You're embarrassing yourself. I'm embarrassing myself? I laughed without humor. You just threw my resume in the trash in front of your colleagues. You mocked my education and my experience. And apparently, that's just standard behavior for you. Michelle's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I overheard some interesting conversations in the bathroom. Seems like undermining others is your specialty. Brianna's ideas for the Cooper account? Thomas's mock-up before the client review? Ring any bells? Color drained from Michelle's face, replaced quickly by anger. You don't know what you're talking about. This is a competitive industry. Only the strong survive. Is that what you tell yourself to justify treating people like stepping stones? At least I have an actual career to be competitive about, Michelle retorted, her voice rising further. Your little online degree isn't worth the digital paper it's printed on. No serious company would consider you qualified for professional work. The nearby conversations halted as Michelle's comment carried across the space. I was acutely aware that we now had an audience, but somehow I no longer cared. That little online degree taught me current industry practices while traditional programs are still catching up, I said, my voice clear and steady. My unprofessional experience gave me direct client interaction skills that agency people often lack. And my portfolio shows results, not just theory. Michelle scoffed loudly. Results? For what? Instagram posts for your friend's hobby business. This is the real world, Audrey. Hammond and Walsh works with multi-million-dollar clients. We need professionals, not amateurs playing at graphic design on their laptops. Each word stung, but I refused to back down. You know what's truly unprofessional? Inviting someone to a networking event under false pretenses. Publicly humiliating them instead of offering constructive feedback. Using your position to tear others down instead of lifting them up. The room had gone increasingly quiet, more people turning to watch our confrontation. From the corner of my eye, I could see a woman in a tailored pantsuit, likely from HR, moving in our direction with concern etched on her face. You've always been jealous of me, Michelle said, her voice now clearly audible across the silent room. Always wanting what I have without being willing to work for it. You think you can shortcut your way to success with your cute little designs and your online courses, but some of us had to earn our positions the real way. The real way? I repeated, finally raising my voice to match hers. You mean by taking credit for others' work? By sabotaging colleagues? By using family gatherings to brag instead of connect? That's your definition of earning success. Michelle's face contorted with rage. You have no idea what it takes to succeed in this world. None. You live in your little creative bubble, thinking talent is enough. It's not. Connections matter. Credentials matter. Perception matters. And the perception in this room right now is that you're a desperate, unqualified wannabe who's riding on her sister's coattails. Her words echoed in the now completely silent ballroom. Dozens of eyes watched us, expressions ranging from shock to discomfort to morbid fascination. The HR woman had stopped halfway across the room, seemingly unsure whether to intervene. In that moment, standing before my sister's contempt and a room full of strangers' judgment, something inside me finally broke free. Years of diminishment, of comparisons, of backhanded compliments and thinly veiled insults converged into a clarity I'd never experienced before. You're right about one thing, Michelle, I said, my voice quiet but unwavering. Perception does matter. And everyone in this room now has a very clear perception of exactly who you are. The silence that followed my statement was absolute. Michelle stood speechless, her face flushed with a combination of anger and dawning embarrassment as she seemed to finally register the audience we'd attracted. The HR director had resumed her approach, her expression a mix of concern and professional determination to defuse the situation. Then suddenly, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Heads turned toward the main entrance, where a commotion of greetings and respectful nods indicated someone important had arrived. I didn't turn, still locked in a staring contest with my sister, whose eyes had widened at whatever she saw behind me. "Mr. Phillips has arrived," someone murmured nearby, and Michelle's expression transformed instantly into a professional smile, though panic still lingered in her eyes. "Nathan," she said loudly, clearly attempting to redirect attention from our scene. "We were just discussing the Westfield campaign. Let me introduce you to—" Her voice trailed off as footsteps approached from behind me. I finally turned, expecting to see an older executive who happened to share our last name. Instead, I found myself looking at Nathan Phillips, the 34-year-old CEO whose photograph I'd seen on the company website during my research. 6 feet tall with dark hair, striking blue eyes, and a perfectly tailored suit, he was instantly recognizable from the corporate headshots. But Nathan wasn't looking at Michelle. His eyes were fixed on me, his expression shifting from confusion to concern as he took in my flushed face and tense posture. "Audrey," he said, immediately moving toward me. "What's wrong? I thought you weren't coming until later." Before I could respond, Nathan had crossed the remaining distance between us. With natural ease, he wrapped his arm around my shoulders and pulled me close to his side. The gesture was protective, intimate, and completely bewildering to everyone watching, including Michelle, whose professional smile had frozen in place. "There you are, beloved wife," Nathan said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. He pressed a gentle kiss to my temple before whispering, "Are you okay? You look upset." The room erupted in whispers. Michelle's face drained of all color, her mouth opening and closing without producing sound. The colleagues who had laughed at my humiliation now looked mortified, exchanging panicked glances with each other. "I'm fine," I managed to say, though my voice trembled slightly. "Just having a discussion with my sister." Nathan's arm tightened around me, his body tensing at my words. His gaze shifted to Michelle, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Michelle Phillips," he said flatly. "Your sister. The one you mentioned works in marketing here." Michelle had recovered enough to attempt damage control. "Mr. Phillips, I had no idea. That is, Audrey never mentioned. We were just having a family disagreement about." Nathan's expression remained coolly professional, but I could feel the tension in his body. It seemed like more than a disagreement from what I overheard. His eyes scanned the nearby trash can, where the corner of my resume was visible among discarded cocktail napkins. With deliberate movements, he reached down, retrieved the crumpled paper, and carefully smoothed it out. "Is this yours?" he asked me gently. "Yes," I replied. Michelle was giving her professional assessment of my qualifications. Nathan's jaw tightened as he quickly scanned the document. 6 months of freelance work for Wilson Manufacturing that increased their social media engagement by 62%. Rebranding for Jessica's Bakery that led to regional recognition and business growth. Advanced certification in UX/UI design. He looked up, his gaze hard as he turned to Michelle. "And you determined this wasn't worth consideration?" Michelle stammered, "I was just explaining that without traditional agency experience. My wife has been doing contract work for Hammond and Walsh for the past 4 months, Nathan interrupted, his voice carrying across the now silent room. "The rebranding concepts for High Point Solutions that everyone has been praising? Audrey's work. The new responsive design framework we're implementing next quarter? Her project." He turned to address the room at large, his arms still firmly around me. "For those who haven't met her yet, this is Audrey Phillips, my wife and one of the most talented designers I've had the privilege to work with. We've kept our relationship private to avoid any appearance of favoritism, but she's been contributing to our success behind the scenes while completing the proper channels for official employment." The HR director had reached us by this point, her expression a complex mixture of surprise and professional concern. "Mr. Phillips, she began carefully, this is an unexpected development. Linda, Nathan acknowledged her with a nod. I apologize for the unconventional introduction. Audrey and I had planned to disclose our relationship at the board meeting next week, once her independent contractor period demonstrated her value to the company regardless of our personal connection. He turned back to Michelle, whose face had gone from pale to ashen. Ms. Phillips, I believe we'll need to have a conversation about professional conduct on Monday morning. 8 a.m. in my office. Michelle nodded mutely, looking as though she might be ill. Nathan then addressed the room once more, his voice regaining its warmth. Please, everyone, continue enjoying the party. I apologize for the interruption. Then, more quietly to me, should we step outside for a moment? I nodded, still processing the surreal turn of events. As Nathan guided me toward the terrace doors, I caught glimpses of astonished faces and heard the buzz of conversation resuming with newfound energy. No doubt the revelation would be the talk of the company for weeks to come. Outside in the cool December air, Nathan immediately pulled me into a proper embrace. I'm so sorry, Audrey. I came as soon as I could. The board meeting ran late, and then traffic was a nightmare. He pulled back to examine my face, his thumbs gently wiping away tears I hadn't realized I'd shed. What happened in there? I took a deep breath, the reality of the situation finally hitting me. You just revealed our marriage to your entire company because my sister was being mean to me. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Well, when you put it that way, it sounds a bit dramatic. But from what I heard walking in, seems like an understatement. I couldn't help but laugh, the tension of the evening finally breaking. You have no idea what you just walked into. Then tell me, he said softly, leading me to a bench overlooking the hotel's winter garden. Everything. As Nathan and I sat on the terrace bench, the holiday party continued inside, now fueled by the shocking revelation and dramatic confrontation they'd witnessed. Through the glass doors, I could see people gathered in clusters, undoubtedly discussing what had just happened. Michelle was nowhere in sight. I should probably explain everything to everyone, Nathan said, still holding my hand. There are going to be a lot of questions. About why the CEO's wife was being publicly humiliated by a marketing director who happens to be her sister? I asked with a wry smile. Among other things, he agreed. But first, are you really okay? I considered the question carefully. Honestly, I'm still processing. One minute I was being torn apart professionally and personally, and the next, you swooped in like some corporate knight in shining armor. It's been a lot. Nathan squeezed my hand. I never thought our big reveal would happen like this. I had it all planned for the board meeting. Charts showing your contributions without revealing your identity, then the disclosure of our relationship, all very professional and above board. Much less dramatic than surprise. The woman your marketing director just trashed is actually my wife. I mimicked an announcer's voice, finding humor in the absurdity of the situation. Nathan laughed, then grew serious. We should go back in. I need to address this properly, and you deserve the recognition you've earned, completely separate from what happened with Michelle. We returned to the ballroom, where the party had resumed its festive atmosphere, though I noticed many eyes following our entrance. Nathan guided me to a small platform where the band had taken a break and gently tapped a knife against his champagne glass. The room gradually quieted. Good evening, everyone, he began, his confident voice carrying easily. I want to take a moment to properly introduce someone special. This is Audrey Phillips, my wife of 6 months. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some of you may have witnessed the uncomfortable scene earlier, and I want to clear up any confusion. Audrey and I made a deliberate decision to keep our marriage private for professional reasons. We met at the Digital Marketing Innovation Conference in Chicago last year, where Audrey was presenting on responsive design integration. I smiled at the memory. I had been one of the scholarship recipients, allowed to present my thesis project alongside industry professionals. My hands had been shaking so badly, I'd nearly dropped my presentation clicker. What most of you don't know, Nathan continued, is that Audrey is the design consultant behind several of our most successful recent campaigns. The High Point Solutions rebranding that won industry recognition last month? That was Audrey's concept and execution. The user experience framework we're implementing next quarter that's already generating client excitement? Audrey's design. He turned to me with pride evident in his expression. We've maintained professional boundaries, with Audrey reporting to our creative director Bradley Thompson rather than directly to me. Her work has been evaluated on its merits alone, without anyone knowing of our connection. Bradley, a bearded man in his 50s, raised his glass in confirmation from across the room. I'd never met him in person, having conducted all our meetings via video conference under my maiden name, Audrey Parker. Our plan, Nathan continued, was to disclose our relationship at next week's board meeting, after Audrey's probationary contract period demonstrated her value to the company based solely on her talents. We wanted to avoid any perception of nepotism or favoritism. He addressed the room more broadly. Hammond and Walsh has always valued merit above all else. Audrey's contributions over the past 4 months have proven her exceptional abilities, regardless of her connection to me or her unconventional career path. In fact, I believe her diverse experience brings a fresh perspective that has already benefited our clients. The HR director, Linda, stepped forward. I can confirm that we've been aware of this situation from the beginning. Appropriate measures were put in place to ensure fair evaluation and prevent conflicts of interest. I felt a surge of gratitude for Nathan and Linda's foresight in handling the situation ethically. When Nathan and I had first discussed the possibility of me working with Hammond and Walsh, we'd immediately recognized the potential complications and developed a plan to address them. As I glanced around the room, I caught sight of Michelle standing in a far corner, her expression unreadable. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away, shoulders hunched uncharacteristically. Nathan wrapped up his explanation, thanking everyone for their understanding and encouraging them to enjoy the rest of the evening. As people returned to their conversations, now with new material to discuss, several colleagues approached us to introduce themselves properly. Your design for the High Point campaign was brilliant, said a woman who introduced herself as Kristen from the digital team. The way you integrated their heritage elements with modern aesthetics was exactly what they needed. The responsive framework you developed is going to change how we approach mobile content, added a developer named Marcus. I've been pushing for those principles for ages. As the evening progressed, I found myself engaged in genuine professional conversations, my ideas and expertise treated with respect. It was everything I had hoped for when preparing for this night, though arriving in a way I never could have anticipated. Eventually, Nathan was pulled away for a conversation with some board members, and I found myself momentarily alone near the dessert table. Michelle approached cautiously, her earlier confidence notably absent. "So," she said quietly, "you're married to Nathan Phillips." "Yes," I replied simply. "How long have you known he's my boss?" I sighed. "Since the beginning." When he mentioned his marketing director, Michelle Phillips, I realized the connection. We discussed it immediately. "And you didn't think to tell me? When would that have been appropriate, Michelle? During one of your monologues about your impressive career? Or maybe when you were making backhanded comments about my little online degree? Or perhaps at Thanksgiving, when you offered to help me get a job at your company, knowing full well you had no intention of actually doing so?" Michelle flinched. "I didn't know you were already working for the company." "As a contractor, yes. Under my maiden name. Reporting to Bradley, not you. We were careful to maintain ethical boundaries. So this whole time, when I was talking about work, I knew exactly what you were referring to. I'd often already seen the campaigns or participated in the projects you were taking credit for." Michelle's face flushed. "I never took credit for your work specifically."
No, iyan olaca.
"But according to what I overheard tonight, you've taken credit for others' contributions. Brianna's ideas for the Cooper account? Thomas's mock-ups." She didn't respond directly to that accusation. Why didn't Nathan ever mention he was married? He does mention his wife. He just doesn't bring her to company events or keep photos on his desk to maintain professional boundaries. If you'd ever bothered to ask about his personal life instead of just talking about yours, you might have learned more. Michelle fell silent, seemingly processing everything. Finally, she asked, "What happens now?" "That's largely up to you," I replied honestly. "Nathan mentioned a meeting Monday morning. I imagine there will be consequences for your professional behavior tonight. And us? As sisters?" I considered the question carefully. "I don't know, Michelle. You've spent years undermining me, dismissing my achievements, and tonight you publicly humiliated me for your own amusement. That's not something I can just forget because the tables turned unexpectedly." Without waiting for her response, I turned and walked back toward Nathan, who was watching our interaction with concern. As I reached his side, he whispered, "Everything okay?" "Not yet," I replied truthfully, "but maybe someday it could be." He nodded in understanding, then turned to greet an approaching board member, his arm sliding naturally around my waist in a gesture that felt both protective and proud. Standing there beside him, being recognized for my talents rather than dismissed for my path, I felt a sense of vindication I'd never anticipated when I'd walked into the party just hours earlier. The night that had begun with humiliation had transformed into something else entirely, a public acknowledgement that success doesn't always follow a conventional route, and that sometimes the people who underestimate you the most are the ones who know you the least. The remainder of the holiday party passed in a blur of introductions and conversations. By the time Nathan and I left around midnight, I had collected business cards from department heads interested in utilizing my design skills, received genuine compliments on my portfolio work, and even been asked to present my UX framework at an upcoming team meeting. As we drove home to our apartment, Nathan reached across the console to hold my hand. "I'm sorry your big introduction to the company happened this way," he said. "I know it wasn't what we planned." "Actually," I replied, "I think it might have been perfect. Nothing about my career path has been conventional. Why should this be any different?" We both laughed, the tension of the evening finally dissipating. The following Monday, while Nathan attended his early meeting with Michelle, I received an email from Linda in HR, requesting my presence for a formal interview for the open creative director position. Despite knowing my connection to the CEO, the company was still following proper protocols, which I deeply appreciated. The interview went smoothly, with my portfolio speaking for itself and my previous contract work for the company serving as proof of my capabilities. By Friday, I had a formal offer letter for a full-time position with Hammond and Walsh, reporting directly to Bradley in the creative department to maintain appropriate professional boundaries. Meanwhile, Michelle had been noticeably absent from the office all week. When she finally returned the following Monday, she had been reassigned to a different department, no longer in a leadership role. Nathan never shared the details of their conversation with me, maintaining his professional integrity, but he did mention that the company had a zero-tolerance policy for the kind of behavior she had displayed. 2 weeks after the holiday party, Michelle texted asking if we could meet for coffee. I agreed with some trepidation, choosing a quiet cafe halfway between our apartments. When I arrived, Michelle was already there, looking uncharacteristically subdued in a simple sweater rather than her usual power suit. She'd ordered my favorite caramel latte and placed it across the table from her. "Thank you for coming," she began awkwardly. "I wasn't sure you would." "I nearly didn't," I admitted. "But we're still family." Michelle nodded, staring into her coffee. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since the party. And a lot of talking, too, with a therapist Linda recommended." This surprised me. Michelle had always dismissed therapy as for people who can't handle their own problems. "The company required it as part of my probation," she explained, seeing my expression. "But it's been illuminating. I've realized some things about myself and my behavior that aren't particularly flattering." "Such as?" I prompted when she paused. "Such as the fact that I've built my entire identity around being the successful one, the achiever, the golden child. And when you started finding your own path to success, it threatened that identity." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I was jealous, Audrey. Not of your online degree or your freelance work, but of your confidence in taking an unconventional path. Of how you define success on your own terms instead of chasing external validation, like I've always done." The admission stunned me into silence. In all our years as sisters, Michelle had never acknowledged any insecurity or jealousy, certainly not toward me. When you showed up at the holiday party, she continued, I panicked. I couldn't let you succeed in my territory, because then what would make me special? So I lashed out in the cruelest way possible. Her voice cracked slightly.
I'm truly sorry, Audrey.
What I did was inexcusable. I took a slow sip of my latte, processing her words. You're right. It was inexcusable. It hurt, Michelle. Not just at the party, but years of dismissing my choices, belittling my accomplishments, treating me like I was less than you. She nodded, accepting the truth of my words. I know, and I don't expect immediate forgiveness. I just want a chance to try to be better, to be the kind of sister you deserve. That would be nice, I said cautiously, but it would take time and consistent effort. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. I understand, Michelle replied. I'm willing to put in the work if you're willing to give me the opportunity. We spent the next hour talking more openly than we had in years, perhaps ever. Michelle shared her struggles with imposter syndrome despite her outward success, how she'd felt trapped by expectations since childhood, always terrified of failing to meet the high bar she'd set. I explained how her constant comparison had affected my self-esteem, how I doubted my own path until finding validation through my work with Nathan's company. We left the cafe with a tentative plan to meet monthly for sister dinners, a small step toward rebuilding what had been broken for so long. 3 months after the holiday party, Hammond and Walsh held a quarterly review meeting where each department presented their recent achievements. As the newest member of the creative team, I was asked to present our department's work on the responsive design framework that had been implemented for several key clients. Standing at the podium before the entire company, including Michelle in her new role, I felt a momentary flutter of nerves. Then I spotted Nathan sitting in the back row, giving me an encouraging nod, and Bradley beside him with a thumbs up. My presentation received enthusiastic applause, with several clients specifically requesting to work with me on upcoming projects. Afterward, as people mingled during the break, Michelle approached cautiously. That was really impressive, she said sincerely. The way you broke down complex design principles so everyone could understand the value, not just the technical team. I learned something new. Thank you, I replied, genuinely appreciating the compliment without the usual backhanded component. My new department is looking for help with visual data presentation, she continued. Would you be interested in consulting on a project? Officially through proper channels, she added quickly. No special treatment. I smiled. I'd be happy to review the project details. Send them to my work email. It was a small moment, but significant in our evolving relationship. For perhaps the first time, Michelle was acknowledging my professional expertise and seeking my input rather than competing or dismissing. As the first anniversary of Nathan and my wedding approached, coinciding with my 6-month work anniversary, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. My unconventional path had ultimately led to both professional fulfillment and personal growth I might never have experienced on a more traditional route. The online degree that Michelle had once mocked had given me cutting-edge skills that many traditionally educated designers lacked. My years in customer service had developed my ability to understand client needs and communicate effectively across different personality types. Even my struggles had built resilience that served me well in the competitive creative industry. Nathan noticed me staring thoughtfully out our apartment window one evening and wrapped his arms around me from behind. Penny for your thoughts? I was just thinking about how sometimes the wrong path leads exactly where you're supposed to be, I replied, leaning back against him. If I'd been able to afford traditional college right after high school, I might never have developed my unique approach to design. If I hadn't struggled financially, I might not appreciate this success so deeply. And if you hadn't received that scholarship to the Chicago conference, we never would have met, Nathan added, kissing the top of my head.
Exactly.
All those detours and obstacles that seemed so frustrating at the time were actually leading me here. The journey hadn't been easy, and the relationship with my sister remained a work in progress. But standing in my beautiful apartment with a husband who valued me and a career that challenged and fulfilled me, I felt profound gratitude for every step of the path, even the painful ones. The true measure of success, I'd learned, wasn't in following a prescribed route or meeting others' expectations. It was in finding the courage to forge your own way, to believe in your value even when others don't see it, and to keep moving forward despite obstacles and detours. Sometimes, the most powerful moment isn't when you finally prove others wrong about you. It's when you finally stop needing their approval altogether. Have you ever had someone underestimate or dismiss your achievements because they didn't fit the traditional path? I'd love to hear how you handled it in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about turning challenging moments into stepping stones for growth. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need a reminder that success doesn't always follow a straight line. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your unique journey is your greatest strength, not your weakness.